This episode is brought to you by Indie Film Hustle TV, the world's first streaming service dedicated to filmmakers, screenwriters, and content creators. Learn more at indiefilmhustle.tv.
Well, I know. Thank you for joining me on literally the last episode for the podcast for Film Trooper. I've been dormant for a while anyway, so people are like, "What? I didn't know that podcast was still around." So those for loyal followers or listeners that are getting this episode, at least we can wrap it up. I kind of wanted to really use this opportunity to do sort of as we can a little bit of masterclass, like everything that we've learned running our podcast and working in the independent film space and meeting a lot of amazing people and other people. You're like, what? No. Anyway, I really just want to have these takeaways so you can have here's one episode that says, hey man, this is after all these years doing this stuff, this is what I've learned, and this is how I'm applying the knowledge that I've acquired to the future now and the future of independent film. And this, I don't know, at the time of this recording, yes, we are basically a month into our COVID-19 shutdown. You're in California, I'm in Oregon, and yeah, being a month, we don't know if it's another month, a couple more months, whatever it might be. But it's definitely a new world, and everybody is first of all, just trying to figure out how just to the basics, just survive, let alone your dream project, your indie film project, all that kind of stuff, or the current projects you're working on. Where does that all fit into the play? So I'm hoping to use this episode as sort of breaking down the principles of what we've learned, and maybe that's where no matter what the situation is, the principles still hold true. So the biggest question is, I'm going to ask you, and then I'll answer myself too for my end of things, is after all these years of running Indie Film Hustle, not just the podcast, but everything about the empire that you've built. Okay. What is really kind of the one takeaway that you've learned after all I don't know, what's the biggest thing you've learned about it all in terms of independent filmmaking?
Well, there's two questions. So is it about independent filmmaking or is it about running Indie Film Hustle? Because there's
let's focus on indie film, just filmmaking, because running, not everybody has a podcast and things like that. So let's focus on the filmmaker going, well, after all, you guys have talked to a ton of different people, interviewed a lot of different people. What is our biggest takeaway from all this experience?
I think the biggest takeaway for me, at least, is that the filmmaker mentality or the mindset of the filmmaker, independent filmmaker, is really stuck in the 90s and early 2000s in the way things are done. And not only in the way, obviously the way things are done, meaning the filmmaking process itself has changed dramatically even in the last 10 to 15 years. It's completely different than when, early 2000s to now, how films are made is drastically different. It's more affordable, more technology, and so on. But the other parts of the business, meaning how movies are made, how are they exhibited, how are they sent out, how do you put together a project, that is changing so rapidly that I think the biggest thing I've learned is to constantly be adjusting, constantly be pivoting my techniques, my approaches to the filmmaking process. Whereas in my last film, On the Corner of Ego and Desire, which I shot in about 4 days at the Sundance Film Festival, I couldn't have done that 15 years ago. It would have been a lot more complicated to do something like that. And it wouldn't, even at 15 years ago, it wouldn't have been at the cost that I was able to do it now, as far as, I think we spent about $3,000 and change on that film. And that being able to understand where the market's going, understand the tech, understand how to pivot. I think that's the biggest lesson, is to not be afraid to change your trajectory, to pivot, to adjust to an ever-changing marketplace. And I was yelling at the top of my lungs for all of last year, guys, something's coming. Something is coming. We're due. I had no idea it was going to be I'm not Nostradamus. I had no idea there was going to be a pandemic, but I did say that, look, guys, there's going to be a financial crisis of one way, shape, or form. We're going to have a downturn, and everything that's happening in our industry right now is all in very good in very good economic times, whereas in everything else as far as good economic times. So as soon as something changes, all those weaknesses, all those cracks in the infrastructure that is Hollywood are going to start to show, and the water's going to start leaking in the dam, and it's going to just break down, and the whole dam's going to come crashing down. And I do believe that. And you, sir, with your first book, The Hollywood Implosion, I don't think, again, you didn't think there was going to be a pandemic that would do it, or a huge financial crisis that do it, but something was going to happen. And I think that, and we're seeing it now, even 4 weeks in. There's reports of AMC shutting down, period. So, and I promise you, there's going to be a few, before this is all said and done, we're going to lose a studio or two, either through acquisition or just straight up bankruptcy, because they're just so leveraged and so in debt, and so non-diversified that they're not going to survive in the new film world that we have, the new economics or ecosystem that we live in today. But I could keep talking forever, but that's just generally the first thing. That's the biggest thing I've learned.
Well, I'll do the improv thing, like yes and
sure.
Yes, and I will add on to what you were saying.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we met up in person a few months ago, prior to all this stuff happening. I was down in Southern California.
Pre-corona.
Yes, pre-corona. I stopped by the Indie Film Hustle headquarters. Very cool. And we've known each other for many years, and I remember we're in your driveway, and I was showing you like that graph, like
yes.
Basically, it was this chart that was showing we are probably in the largest economic bubble that's about to pop. Mm-hmm. And again, we had no idea it was going to be a pandemic that was going to kick it off, but we knew that something was brewing around the corner. And so you and I both had this look on our faces in the driveway, going, "Yeah, man, something's gonna happen. I don't know what's gonna be, but oh boy, here it comes."
And by the way, I showed that graph to everybody. Like anyone I would meet on the street, "Hey, come here, look at this thing. Look at this thing." And then you see their faces just go, "Oh my God." And by the way, everyone listening, we are not in an economic crisis yet. This is all still spawned from a pandemic. The issues that are in the economy are starting to show, but they're pumping so much money into the system, this funny money that the Fed is throwing in there, that they're still going to, just wait. And I don't wish it. I wish it doesn't happen, but we have not seen an economic crisis yet. We're just starting to see it.
Right. This is just the impetus to, set this thing off that it was already due for a correction anyway. But anyway, so moving forward, that makes sense, because we were like, okay, when you're an independent filmmaker, and what is that classic quote from Orson Welles? Like, he spent 95% of his time hustling, chasing money, and like 5% of his time making movies. Mm-hmm. So, and he was just like, that's no way to live. Like, this is Orson Welles. And that economic paradigm, or the business model, really hasn't changed in a long time, because isn't that like the biggest question a lot of independent filmmakers have? It's like, well, how do I get the money for my project? Where do I get the funding to make something happen, right?
Where I think the question needs to be switched is that, how can I get money for my project, is how can I create a project for the resources that I have, or the resources that I can get to. So instead of chasing that golden carrot for 5 years because I need $5 million to make my epic, I can't make a movie for less than $5 million, which I had that conversation with myself and other people, unfortunately, throughout my career. I finally decided, hey, what can I afford, and what kind of story can I tell within that? And then humble myself to go down to lower budgets, which is much smarter financially. It's much smarter for longevity in this business. And then slowly build up from there, where then you can get to the 1 million and the 5 million, but you've got to prove yourself first. And even if you have made a few features, you want to make another movie, I promise you, in the coming years, it's going to be a lot harder to find $1 or $2 million investors, because the $1 and $2 million movies aren't making money anymore, because that's a whole other conversation. We can get to it later in regards to the distribution world that we're dealing with. But I think that's how you should switch that conversation in your own head.
Yeah, that's a good one. And so with my experience and all the different people I've interviewed on Film Trooper, I was on a quest to just find out the goal of like, how does it, we have like different paradigms of like the film world. We have like obviously the studio system. I called sort of like the indie film market or like the film market world. So this is like the people that are operating in the Cannes film market world, the American film market world. And then you have about 95% of everybody else working in the ultra independent, the hustlers, the indie film hustler community, the Film Trooper community. I was using a term called an uber independent filmmaker, which is like you're not playing in that world. Like you can make your movies and you could use these different services that keep changing left and right. And who else knows better this than yourself with all the work that you've done on distribution companies and things like that. But having these resources to get your work out there to the world online, we're 95% of us are working in that world, and a few of us, a very small percentage, actually gets to move up the ranks, maybe get into the film market world, get into the studio system. Again, very, very, very few. So from that experience, I was on a quest trying to find out, well, how does like the uber independent filmmaker who I've chosen not to live in California, I'm up here in Oregon, how do someone like myself who wants to make storied content or film content make a living using these online resources that we have now? And that was sort of the quest of Film Trooper. And the biggest takeaway I got was from, to me, the greatest successful independent filmmaker of all time was George Lucas. The guy, made his Star Wars film for the studios, but ever since then, he all the money he made all his movies on his own at that point. Yes, there was studio, involvement here and there, but he wasn't enslaved by the studio system. And his biggest takeaway after all his years of experience, he said, you know what? All the money is in the action figures.
And it's in lunchboxes, idiots. Yeah.
That's it. And when you unpack what that means, is just simply saying that the art that we create, the films, the books, the music, whatever it might be, that's just like a starting point. But in order to make money, in terms of the money to create a sustainable living, you have to have all these ancillary materials and sources coming out from that project, which is you talk about in your latest book, The Rise of the Film Entrepreneur, right?
You mean this one, sir?
Oh, I love that. Oh, hey, you know what? Watch this. Yes, and it's also discussed in this book too. In my book, but it's true. It comes down to this thing, like, okay, so I came away with it going, okay, so our films are nothing more than an advertisement, and like we're, so what is it that we're selling that has a higher price point? Especially if our films, you can get them for free online, or somebody might just wait till it's a 99 cents rental, or you get a streaming deal with, which won't necessarily always match up to your budget per se. But you're like, well, how do I control the ownership of that property so that I can exploit it more? And that's really what it is. It's like the whole business of film. The film business is exploitation, license exploitation. And it's in a book called The Biz by Schuler M. Moore, who's an entertainment lawyer. He just says, just bluntly, I mean, it's just like cold and cut and dry. The whole business revolves around the exploitation of the license. That's it. As soon as you wrap your head around that, you're like, that is the business. So how do we as uber independent filmmakers be in the business of exploitation of our own licenses? And that's why your book is fantastic, because it just lays it out.
Thank you.
And I hope that my book adds like a little bit of knowledge bombs here and there to help people, take away from that. So my takeaway from the whole experience of Film Trooper was, okay, if our movies are, if all the money's in the action figures, what is the action figure that I'm creating? Which is why those who have been following me, I switched a couple years ago. I got into real estate, and I said, I'm going to use film content, some sort of creative content, as my amplification to sell a higher price product, which happens to be a higher price service, which is real estate. So now, and not only that, but it got me out of the world of, I guess, servicing independent filmmakers, because indie film hustle, your customer base would be that part of your empire is for the independent filmmaker.
Yeah.
Once I cease really putting, once I switched my audience and I went from basically independent filmmakers to people that are looking to buy and sell homes or real estate lot, then I had to start from scratch. It's not like I had a huge following from like independent filmmakers who are like, oh, we're going to follow them to like buying and selling houses.
In Oregon.
Like, it's like, it was, yes, exactly. It's completely starting from scratch, but I was trying to apply the principles of like, I get to make a creative show, which I have. I have a little show called Around the Neighborhood at aroundtheneighborhood.tv.
Amazing. It's amazing show. I watch every episode, sir.
Thanks.
Every episode's on
thanks.
Facebook. I always love it.
So the principles of filmmaking are still there. I still have to come up with a subject. I actually write scripts because I'm trying to find nuggets of how to create like mystery enough questions to be answered up front, or questions proposed up front, and then throughout the story it's uncovered by the end of it. And then the whole process of filming, editing, music, all that kind of stuff. All that stuff is there. It's just now that I've embraced knowing that this is a free product. This is the free content, but I get to choose how I make it because it's creative enough for me to have that creative outlet. And the byproduct just happens to be selling a higher price service. Mm-hmm. And one of the other takeaways, I don't know if you've really came across this too, Alex, but a lot of people in the film industry, they have a production company because they have the skill sets to shoot video product, and and they have a production company, and a lot of them really good. But what it is, the basis of that business model is they have to wait for a company to hire an advertisement agency. Mm-hmm. That agency controls who they work with in a production company. So your production company is hoping you have relationships with an ad agency that's going to give you money to make a production, but you're based off the client's needs. Mm-hmm. So that pays the bills. So for a lot of people out there, you're running your production company is paying your bills, but you always have this dream of like, I can't wait to make my short film. I'm going to use this money, all the resources I have, I'm going to make more independent film. So I thought to myself, what if you flip it on its head? Instead of waiting for the ad agency to hire you or hire your production company or a client to hire you, why don't you find the product that you like and maybe become sort of like an affiliate salesperson for that product, but the content you make for that product, you get to dictate it. You get to dictate, creatively how you want to advertise or sell that product. And that's really what I've just done. All I've done is saying I get to create this like around the man town show and creatively go into it. But again, the byproduct is that. What interesting things have you found interviewing with a lot of different filmmakers and their situation that makes you that maybe little added nuggets that you have in your book that can expand upon, that kind of go like flip things on its head a little bit so filmmakers can start looking at things differently again?
Well, the book Rise of the Film Entrepreneur is kind of like a complete mind shift in how you make films. It completely changes the way you read that book, and you can't unread it. It's kind of like one of those things when you hear the concept, you're just like, well, I can't not think about this anymore. I can't unsee it. One thing I have found, and I've had a few conversations. The book's been out now for about 4 months or so like about 4 months and change. And the one thing I hear from certain filmmakers is that I've actually had angry filmmakers who are just like, well, I'm an artist and I can't, I'm an artist and it's hard enough to be a filmmaker, let alone have to think about how to sell a lunchbox or build out a business to sell vegan products for a vegan movie that I made. Like, this is ridiculous. And all of this stuff. And I've heard that a handful of times, and I've had some debates with certain filmmakers about it. And I want to kind of lay it out something really clearly here. When you create something that is a different way of looking at the same problem that's been looked at the same way, there's always going to be resistance. There's always going to be someone or somebody that's stuck in their own mindset. They're stuck in their own comfort zone and don't want to do it. That was the car with the buggy. That was a gas light with the electric bulb. It's constant. Anytime there's a shift, anytime there's a big change in mindset, there's always going to be people who want to fight against the change, whether that be their own insecurities or whether they just don't want to. They want to hold on to that's the only thing they've ever known. So I've had a little bit of pushback from that, and I wanted to lay out 3 different paths, very simple paths that all filmmakers can walk. Film path number 1 is I'm going to be a director. I'm going to be a director for hire. So I'm going to try to create a demo reel, maybe even make an independent film really low budget just to kind of get somebody can see what I've done, or before it used to be music videos and commercials. But I'm good. My goal is to play in the studio system, to play in television or in the studio system and basically be an employee. A very high paid and well paid employee, but an employee nevertheless. And there's nothing wrong with that path. The greatest filmmakers of all time have gone down this path, and that's fine. The second path is, okay, well, now I'm directing and I'm working and maybe I'm doing commercials and music videos. Maybe I've been making some documentaries or docuseries or whatever, but I'm still, instead of being an employee and working for all these companies, I'm going to build a production company. And now you basically become a self-employed film director or filmmaker. You're a self-employed filmmaker. So now you're not just an employee anymore. You're creating your own jobs by working directly with clients and or studios. So you could be producing shows, you could be producing commercials, music videos, any kind of video content at all. But now you're in somewhat more control, but still dependent on a client, still dependent on the whims of a client and or studio down that path. And there is nothing wrong with that path either. If you want to walk that path, walk it. I walked both those paths before I found my path. Then there's the third path. Now, the third path is arguably you still have a production company, let's say, and you're still making a film. You're still a filmmaker. But I'll go into the post world now. All of a sudden now, instead of just being an editor for hire and then opening up your own post house or freelance editing with your own gear, now you create a post-production company that is selling services to clients. But again, you're like, I wouldn't mind some of that passive income, some of that, that I'm asleep in money. And then I'll start, maybe I'll create a LUT package for color grading. And maybe I'll create some motion graphic templates that I could put up online to sell. And all of a sudden, that company starts creating and generating other revenue streams other than its key point, which is post-production, whether those be editing, color grading, whatever, dollars for hours, basically. You're still, that's what's paying the bills, but you're starting to build out these other revenue streams. Maybe you're shooting some stock footage, maybe you're shooting VFX plates, all these things that you're putting out into the world and selling it on a passive income standpoint, meaning you put it up on a platform and or sell it through your website, and people are buying this from you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without you having to put any more hours other than what you originally created in creation of the product itself. Sooner or later, if you're doing your job right and you want to get out of that 9-to-5 rat race of working for a client, then this business has to grow and these revenue streams have to grow enough to overtake that revenue stream. And once that happens, you're free. You're free to do whatever you want. You're free to create whatever you want within the realm of your reality, meaning within the realm of your financial reality, within your resources, within your connections. That is what I am selling, and that is what I am preaching and teaching in Rise of the Film Entrepreneur, is to create a business that pays you while you sleep using the creative product that you are making, which is an independent film, a series, a docuseries, web content, whatever that is, it's all created within the film entrepreneurial method. That's what I found myself to be happy with. I know a lot of filmmakers like, well, I want to work with the best of the best in the world. I want to work with deacons. And I'm like, that's great, dude. But there's like 30 guys who do that. He's only made 60 movies or whatever he's made. That's a very small doorway to try to get into. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's still, let's say, a lot of other, filmmakers you can work with a cinematographer, director, writer, whatever. And if that's the path you want to walk, then go for it. Like I said, some of the greatest filmmakers in history have walked that path. But every great filmmaker that has walked the path in the studio system understands the business, understands what they're doing. Yes, some of them are tours, tours like Chris Nolan, David Fincher, those kind of guys. But they all understand the business of it. They're not just creating art for the sake of creating art. They understand their market. They understand their audience. They understand what they're trying to do. They're just playing in a much, much bigger sandbox. But even those guys have to work within the rules of the sandbox. There's only one filmmaker on the planet who could have brought Avatar to life, and that was James Cameron. They weren't giving Spielberg $500 million to go do what he was going to go do. He was the only filmmaker to do that. You see, it's just very small amounts of people at that level. And that's at any industry, any business whatsoever, whether it be music, whether it be writing, whether it be whatever. There's only a handful at the very top. And my thing is, like you were saying earlier, there's the studio system, there's the markets, and then there's the 95% of us. I'm trying to help the 95%. The other people who are the 5% that want to make those kind of films, my God, go for it. You can actually still use some of the techniques in the film entrepreneurial method in your path without question. But if you're smart, in my opinion, and the way I feel that the business is moving forward, because I feel that those two systems, those two paths that we talked about earlier, I feel that that whole infrastructure is starting to shake and starting to crumble. And we're seeing it right now. And in 6 months, you're going to see it even more. Where if you want to survive as a filmmaker and have a fighting chance without the lottery ticket of getting into the studio system or getting into that system by playing by those rules and so on, creating something that you own, you create, you control, allows you to do whatever you want. And that freedom is, I think, the biggest thing I'm trying to sell with this book and with this entire concept is the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want. And I'm the perfect example of it because I walked all three of those paths. I started off as a director, going after director for hire and an editor for hire. Then I opened a production company, produced commercials, produced series, did all my post-production for all that stuff. Then while that was still going on, I started creating Indie Film Hustle. I started creating other revenue streams to the point where that other stuff took over the revenue stream that I was doing through post-production. And I just shut down my post-production and my production company for outside business, unless it's something I want to do or it's a partner I want to work with. But I don't have to do that anymore. And I became financially free by creating myself, not rich, financially free. And that's a very, very big distinction. I am not rich by any stretch of the imagination. I'm still hustling every day. I still got to come out and work at my business every day, but I choose to do it. If I have to take a week or two off, the business still makes money. And that's what I want filmmakers to be able to do with their films. And in the book, I lay out so many case studies about filmmakers who are doing this. Is it a long-term play? Absolutely. Is it going to take a lot of work? Absolutely. Is it completely the opposite of everything they ever taught you in film school? Yes. And that's why a lot of filmmakers are upset about it. A lot of filmmakers get angry about it. Like, it's hard enough making a movie. I can't think about all this business stuff. Then don't. Walk the other two paths and see how it works out for you. If it works out for you, great. If it doesn't, and you're 10 years in and you're still trying to make that thing go and you're working at Taco Bell as a side hustle to keep chasing that dream, do it. If that's something that you want to do, go for it. But I've given another option that filmmakers have not really been thinking about on a grand scale, and that's why I'm trying to change the mentality of how films are made. But I wanted to kind of lay out those three distinct paths because it's been a lot of confusion, not confusion, but a lot of, I get a lot of pushback here and there from filmmakers, and I just want to clarify that. And I think that hopefully will help kind of clarify the whole situation. What do you think?
No, I like it. I like how you applied aspects of the rich dad, poor dad model of employed, self-employed, business owner, and investor into the three scenarios, as well as Pat Flynn's whole
passive income thing, yeah.
Passive income model that he's put out there to kind of get people thinking. So it's great to see it all wrapped up together. But I think too, like what you mentioned about the angry filmmaker, it's true. When I brought up the scenario, which is like, hey, guess what? Our films are nothing more than an advertisement for something more expensive. That rubbed a lot of filmmakers the wrong way, because they don't want to see that they're just like slaves to some sort of, commerce, or, they see their art form as something higher. So I said, well, if you're not comfortable with that analogy, just use this analogy. If you're an artist, you're listening to this, and you're still not comfortable the way what we're talking about, then switch it, turn it on its head, and come to grips to say that your film is an amplifier. It's an amplifier for something bigger. What is that bigger thing? What is that bigger message? And then if that message, can you monetize that message at a higher price point than your initial film? So, again, it's basically the same thing, but it's what you're comfortable with in terms of how to come to grips with it. Is it an amplifier, or is it an advertisement, or are they both the same, and how do you work with that? So, yeah. So with that said, I want to talk about like just some principles of filmmaking that seem to hold true no matter what is going on in the world. In terms of what I've come to grips with is, if we're talking about a narrative, both either feature or like a feature or short film or even a documentary, then the narrative, it's the aspect of storytelling is still, that's it. That's at the core of everything. It's storytelling. I worked in the game industry. I worked for Sony PlayStation for over, a decade. And I discovered that in the world of video games, gameplay is king. That is at the core of everything, which is why it doesn't matter if you spent all this money, have the best looking graphics on like the latest platform in the video game world. A little game that has, Minecraft that's using 8-bit graphics, but the gameplay is addictive and super fun, people will gravitate towards that. The same applies for the world of filmmaking. It doesn't matter how gorgeous your lighting is and all that kind of stuff and what cameras you use. If the story is just dry, the performances are dry, or your documentary subject is just dry and boring, it's not going to engage an audience. But you can have like the worst shot stuff with the sound pretty good, but if the story is just compelling enough, you'll stick with it. You'll put up with all the other garbage just because the story is intriguing enough. So those are the main things that I came away with, is like, no matter what happens, that in itself is always going to be the tried and true principle. Do you agree, or do you see other things that I might be missing in terms of principles of just filmmaking, no matter what's happening in the world?
Well, before I get to that, I wanted to piggyback something on the last thing we said really quickly. I like the amplifier and you're just trying to be nice. You're such a nice guy. I swear to God, you're like the nicest person I know, Scott. I'm a little bit more hard-edged, so this is the frank, raw reality of this. If you have a problem with the concept of money and making money with your movies or with your video content, understand that you're a hobbyist. You're not a professional. There is a huge difference between a hobbyist and a professional. I see 2 guitars sitting behind you, Scott. I could pick up one of those guitars and start to learn how to play guitar. I can play the guitar. I could sit there for 6 months and play the guitar and learn how to play the guitar in my house. Then maybe if I'm even somewhat okay, go out to some coffee shops, post-corona, go out to some coffee shops and maybe do a couple free gigs, and then maybe a little bit later I can maybe get a gig or 2 here on the weekends. Is that going to support me and my family? No. It will not, until it grows into something much, much larger. So during that process, I am a hobbyist. Now, if I can go and sell out Madison Square Garden with my guitar, I am a professional. If I can go sell 10,000 streams and make $1 a stream for a month, I'm a professional. I am covering, you see what I'm saying? That is the difference between a filmmaker who's like, I don't want to talk about the money. Well, if you don't want to talk about money, you're a hobbyist. Period. You're an artist. That's fine. And there's nothing wrong with it. If you want to be an artist, be an artist. Create content and create film and create stories that are important and impactful to you. But understand that if you cannot sell it, if you cannot monetize it, you will not survive in this industry at the level that you want to be. Meaning that if you can make your movies for $500 a pop, my friend, do whatever you want. But if you need $100,000, $50,000, $200,000, $500,000 to make your movies, you have a fiduciary responsibility to respect the money and understand how you're going to recoup that money. Unless it's a gift, you got to recoup it, because unfortunately, unlike that guitar that's sitting behind Scott right now, I don't know how much that guitar costs, but I know it doesn't cost $5,000. I know it doesn't cost $10,000. It's a very affordable art form to play, where playing as a filmmaker is an extremely, if not one of the most extremely expensive art forms and complicated art forms on the planet. So understand those distinctions, and that will hopefully help clarify your position. I'm sorry, I had to go on that tangent. I thought it was very important to say that.
That was great. I thought that was great. And then we could piggyback to the other one, which is just principles of filmmaking. Now that everybody gonna go, okay, hopefully people are in this situation go, okay, where do I fit in this camp, or where do I want to go? You know, they're Scott and Alex are laying down some things here. So now moving forward, you know, now we're moving into the part of inspiration of like, what can you do now? Now that we kind of laid out like, okay, here's the reality of the world that's changing. You pick what lane you want to be in, go for it, but just be aware that the other lanes exist. So it's one of those things like now, the inspiration, what do filmmakers do now moving forward? And we'll start with the principles. I brought up just a simple principle. It's like, it doesn't matter. The story is still king.
Story is always king.
Yeah.
Story is always king. There's no question about it. You look at Paranormal Activity, you look at Blair Witch, you look at some of these low budget films that don't look particularly well, but the story is intriguing enough to the core audience that they're going after that it makes sense. So story is number one. I don't care about the Alexa. I don't care about the Red. I don't care about Cook lenses or whatever lens you're going to do or whatever cool little drone or gimbal or what. No one cares. No one cares about the gear. You've got to have, look, my iPhone shoots well enough, as Sean Baker proved, with like 5 versions back with Tangerine. He shot his entire movie on an iPhone. And he was a professional. He understood what he was doing with that camera. It doesn't matter about the technology anymore. The image is going to be good enough. If you're remotely competent, you're going to be able to get a good image. It's about story first and foremost. Second principle is understanding your audience. You have to understand who you're making this movie for. If you're making a generalized drama, then I wish you the best of luck unless you have some major money behind you. So focusing on the audience and who you're going to go after with this audience, that's going to be really key, because if you don't have someone who's going to want to see this film, then you have no chance of making your money back. And if you're trying to make a broad movie and you're going to try to independently self-distribute and all that stuff, you are doomed. It's going to take I've seen some movies, I've seen some shows that are so good. I mean, you talk about cream rising to the top. It's so good, but there is so much noise in today's streaming world. There's so much content to be consumed that even if your stuff is the best of the best, it still might get lost and have to be found somewhere else later in life. But you're not, by that time, it's not going to mean anything. And I know a lot of people are like, well, it's really that good. Someone's going to notice. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. And that was the case. I always argued that cream will rise to the top. And you know what? It very might well be. But you might submit maybe the greatest films of your great film is submitted to Sundance, South by, Tribeca, Cannes, and like 5 or 6 of the other big ones, and none of them get the genius. None of them get it. And I promise you, Sundance has gotten it wrong many, many times. South by has gotten it wrong many, many times. And these films that got rejected from those look, I mean, Chris Nolan's first movie, The Following, was rejected not only from Sundance, but by Slamdance the first time. Then he waited a whole year and submitted it again, and he finally got in. Chris Nolan, they're not the Nostradamus of filmmaking by any stretch. So if you don't understand your audience and how you're going to sell this thing, how you're going to get eyeballs on your product, then you're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. And the way this world is changing so dramatically, where before theatrical was the bulk of the money was originally back in the days. That's the only place you could exhibit your film and generate revenue from it. Then VHS came in, then home video came in, then DVD came in, then this cable, don't forget cable was in there somewhere as well, TV deals, all that stuff. But then the streaming thing showed up. And then there was TVOD, and then there's SVOD, and now there's AVOD, and there's so many different ways to generate revenue. But that money just keeps dropping lower and lower and lower. And the same thing that happened in the music industry is happening in our industry, where music is essentially worthless on a price point, not the artistic aspect of it, but the model, the way it's set up now. Artists, musicians can't make money with their music anymore. They have to sell. They have to do tours. They have to sell engagements. They have to sell, photo ops and T-shirts and hats and get sponsorship deals to survive. And that's where we're going with, especially in the indie film space and the filmmaking space. So those are, I think, the two big principles: story and understanding who your audience is and how you're going to get that movie to that audience.
I like it. I want to do the improv. Yes, and because I think that's a good point about audience. Not just, okay, I'm going to take a deeper level. We're going to go deeper level, unpack it even more in terms of audience, knowing who your audience is, not just for your film to the eventual audience, but made and getting it successful all the way along the line, knowing who your audience, who you're talking to is. And this is really just a basic business principle and communicating principle. So, you and I have had opportunities to kind of dabble into the opportunity of like pitching ideas or getting a project in place that looked like it was going to go big, like it was going to go studio. Yes. I had an experience knowing my audience. I had going all the way to pitching a movie to Lawrence Bender, who is Tarantino's producing partner. I made it all the way through all the gatekeepers, my script and the project, everything like that, got all the way through. So I had a face-to-face meeting with Lawrence Bender. The problem was you have to know your audience. Even though I got that far, meaning my audience is Lawrence Bender. And I had a kind of raunchy American comedy that was in play, and he doesn't make raunchy American comedies.
Right.
I was selling my shoe design to a hat maker. This was not going to work. Right. Not only that, but I made the fatal flaw too of like talking about my production experience at Sony PlayStation and things, just to say my competence level. And the reality is, when you get to these pitch meetings, remember story is king? They don't care. They didn't care. And when you ever go, our friend Stephanie Palmer from Good in a Room, she's transitioned from helping like screenwriters. She's up here in Portland. So she is out there helping business owners and taking the next step. But she was running for many years at the American Film Market. They had the pitch conference. So it was a very popular conference. And then Pilar Alessandra had taken over since Stephanie stepped down. There's I forget the producer's name from Dallas Buyers Club. His brother is Cassian Elwes from The Princess Bride and all these great movies in the 80s and 90s. And he's one of the main producers for a long time, and another producer. And you get to see in real time in this conference people pitching their story ideas to a known, proven producer. And you'll see cringeworthy, these people that are pitching, but bless their heart, they have the courage to be exposed to everybody and pitching their idea for real. You'll see the fatal flaw that I had made and other people have made, because they will go into, here's what the poster looks like and all this kind of stuff. And you realize that's knowing your audience. Right. The producer at that very moment does not want to know that you're going to be that involved with like the art department and all this kind of stuff. They just want to know, do you have a interesting story that I can champion, that we can move forward to the next step? Your goal is not to get the damn thing made right there. Your goal is just like, can you hook them with an interesting story? So the guy who wins that guy with like the few times I've been there, the ones that win the pitch conference, it's the one that has stripped down. They don't talk about their filmmaking experience. They don't talk about anything. They just go, here's the story. They tell the story. If it's interesting, intriguing enough, they always win. Mm-hmm. So again, knowing who your audience, even at the micro level before you get things made, is very important. On top of that, one of the great takeaways I learned after all the years running Film Trooper in the podcast was this episode I did where scientists, a lot of them don't believe in luck. They believe in high probability or low probability. So you were talking about somebody makes an amazing movie or docuseries. It's just really well done. So they've helped their chances because they've increased their probability of getting it discovered or moving to the next level because they made something phenomenal. But they have to put it in play with all the right pieces to increase their probability of getting picked up or getting it sold or making it the next level. If they don't, then that probability goes down. So when you look at luck in the industry, it's one of those things like if scientists don't believe in luck, but they believe in probability, you got to work every little angle you can to either increase your probability or you're going to decrease it. So that's like pragmatic things that go, oh, okay, that's great. So now we're talking about, I want to kind of dive in a little bit about case studies, because you have them in your book, I have them in my book. And some of the stuff that the case studies are important because I think they leave a lasting impression because we're going to tell a story. Now you and I get to share stories about other people making it, I'll start with mine, meaning that we're talking about low budget. So I made a feature film called The Cube where I made for like about $500 without a crew. Now it's like, what? Without a crew? All it was is like you set up a camera, you set up all the gear, you light the space. I learned this term from the Half Nelson cinematographer who got an Oscar nod or a nomination, I think, for his work in Half Nelson. And all he talked about, he said it was so low budget that they were like, we just had to light the space and let Ryan Gosling roam around, and I just had to, capture it, as opposed to film like lighting each shot. So I was like, okay, in the world of no crew, you light the space, you set up a camera, there's not a lot of hand, motion the camera, and you hit record, you jump in, you hope things are in focus, and you go. And so it was doable. But the main takeaway from that is that my film wasn't very good. Like, I'm proud of it, but like I look at it, like my acting was really rough at the beginning because as an actor, I'm thinking about everything. I'm on camera going, oh my God, the microphone's too far away. I got to project. I'm not being true. Like it was just terrible. Like I got through it, but I'm proud of it because it still has a story that's a beginning, middle, and end. I was able to sell it online. I kept my budget so low because I knew, here's the thing that people need to know. For a while there, my wife worked at a company that actually saw the real numbers of what films were making in the VOD space or the digital download space. And I was appalled. Films that had no stars, no major distribution backing, were maybe making $3,000 online at the time.
And that was back in the day, and that was a success story.
Yes. And then when I did the analysis of films that had, name distribution and some name star or somebody you kind of knew, maybe they were making $25,000. What I took away from that was like, holy cow. Like, this means that these budgets for these movies were not $3,000. They were not $25,000. They were a lot more, and they're not making any money. It forced me to make a feature film for $500. Then the exploration of selling that online was using all these different platforms and realizing that I eventually made my money back a little bit more. So I can say I'm a successful filmmaker because I made a profit on my film. But running Film Trooper was the exploration of like all the things I was trying to do and meeting people like, well, what's the next step? I found out that I made more money selling my book than I did my movie.
Shocking.
So I'm just saying, like, they put that in perspective. But we're talking about the cream rises to the top. Just like a few days ago, one of the great stories that a case study we can look at is the director David F. Sandberg, who's, I think he's from Sweden. I think, up in the Nordic world. He made the movie, that short film called Lights Out.
Yeah.
It got picked up, made a feature film called Lights Out, because the guy who made Saw and the Conjuring movies and Aquaman.
Justin Lin.
Yeah. No, not Justin Lin. No, he did the Fast and Furious movies prior to that.
But Justin
Australian.
Lin. Oh,
another Asian guy.
Sorry. Okay.
Alex, another Asian guy. You know what? We're gonna take a quick pause. I'm gonna look this up.
Go for it.
I can't believe I'm running, but he's Australian, but he's Asian, but he's from Australia. What? Like I have my glasses on. James Wan.
James Wan, thank you.
So
not Justin Lin, James Wan.
Okay, James Wan is amazing. If you look at his films, I'm a huge fan. That I can't remember his name, but anyway, but okay, so he champions David F. Sandberg's movie Lights Out, and our buddy Jason Buff from Indie Film Academy had a really great long interview with him on his podcast. He got him at the right when he was in the middle of making the Lights Out, feature film. So you have to understand, and it was first of all, his short film was fantastic. And he had a YouTube following because he was just sharing his filmmaking experiences, but he made a very solid 2-minute, enjoyable, creepy, scary horror film, Lights Out.
But with that said, it's a lottery ticket he got. He got a lot. He won a lottery ticket.
He did, because he won a film festival. But what I'm saying is he did the first step was make something good. And we're talking about directing. He shows his chops in the most economic way possible. A 2-minute horror film that gets the notice and gets the next step, meetings, where he gets, the backing feature. So they put him on a feature. You know what? From that feature, he gets Annabelle Creation, and he delivers on Annabelle Creation, because if you're a fan of those series, it just works. But then he gets Shazam. He makes Shazam. Well, this is a great story because if you want to take that first track of becoming a director, he was making quality content in a short form, translated to a long form, that did well enough. He understood the economics of it. But during this coronavirus shutdown, he just made another film called Shadowed. And if you haven't seen it, again, it's brand new. A week ago it came out. And it's fantastic. It's 2 minutes long. He's working with his, I don't know if it's his actress or his wife or his girlfriend that they're together. But he does this whole behind the scenes, and you get to see his vulnerability, where he's like having the same struggles of all of us filmmakers. But what he's doing, it's like he's still delivering. He went full circle. He did a short 2-minute film, got 3 features that did well. He does this short 2-minute film, and he's still struggling at the 2-minute film. But that's a great story if you look at it. Look up David F. Sandberg. Look at his trajectory from Lights Out to his feature films to his latest short film in the coronavirus called Shadowed. Yes, a lottery ticket, but for people that want to see if they're a good director, this is my little thing. If you really want to see if you're a good director, go ahead. And also, if you're a screenwriter, go ahead and adapt a famous short story that is in the public domain, something that exists already.
Stephen King will give it to you for $1. He'll give you a license. He gives you any of his short stories for $1 for all filmmakers to make. So that's something. If you don't know about that, you can get any short story that Stephen King still has the rights to. He will license it to you for $1. You can't make any money on it, but it's a great showpiece. And Frank Darabont did that, and a bunch of other filmmakers have done that over the years. So yeah, go for that. That's another area.
Okay, so there you go. So there's existing. So as a writer, you have to see how well your story chops are. Can you translate an already existing entity that is proven? Then to test your directing chops, you direct that. Can you direct a Edgar Allan Poe short story? And if you can't direct it, then you can't blame the story because it's proven. This really will test you to see whether or not you're a good storyteller. If you have story sense, if you're a good director, if you're able to do that, that'll give you the confidence to move forward with your own stuff. So those are like case studies of how to, take that first path you were talking about, working towards a director for hire. Are you even that good? Because let's be honest, we see a lot of independent filmmakers come through, and they do make a lot of. I meet a lot of filmmakers like, wow, they make a lot of films, and it's like, but then at the end of the day, you're like, man, they're not that good, but they still make them. So they're not going to get hired as a director or hire, but
if I may piggyback on that as well, that example is great. It's a great example. I know his work, but David's opportunity was presented because he won a lottery ticket, in the sense that James Wan saw it and championed him. There are probably 10,000 David Sandberg. David F. Sandberg. Yeah, David Sandberg's out in the world, if not more, that are quality filmmakers. And if given the opportunity to play in that sandbox, they'll kill it without question. But he was at the right place at the right time with the right product. That's a lottery ticket. And Robert Rodriguez was that way. Kevin Smith, basically every filmmaker from the early 90s were in that camp where they made something at the right time, because a lot of those films, if they were released today, El Mariachi wouldn't even be looked at today. Clerks wouldn't even be looked at today in today's world. So he was at the right place, right time with the right product. What I'm always talking about now with the Film Entrepreneur method is to hedge your bet a little bit. Help that probability a little bit more. Maybe by building an audience online, maybe by getting attention from a large group of people where you have an audience who's really loving. You may make 10 or 15 shorts like that, where now you have 200,000-300,000 people following you. And then all of a sudden, that noise attracts certain people to you, as opposed to you throwing out that line, that one line to catch a fish, where you're creating a full net where you could hopefully draw and leaving bait for someone to come in towards you. It's happened to me in many ways by what I've done with Indie Film Hustle and my other companies. And I think that's another plan. Both the same path, just looking at it a little bit differently. So just because it's really good doesn't mean that James Wan's going to look at it. Doesn't mean that J.J. Abrams is going to go, hey, kid, you can come and direct with me. Or what's his name from District 9? If it wasn't for Peter Jackson, do we know who he is?
Neil
Blomkamp?
Yeah.
And I'm not taking anything away from his talent. I'm a huge fan of Neil Blomkamp, and I love his films that he's made. But if that movie comes out 10 years later, 5 years later, does anyone care? Because he was at a certain point with visual effects where it could make a little noise. You remember that movie, that short film 405?
Yeah.
You remember those guys?
Yeah.
Those guys made this little short film back in the day when visual effects were just coming out, and they took the whole town by storm with this little short film about a 747 landing on the 405. And it's a great short. But that today, it's just a cool YouTube video. No one would really care. But back then, it was right place, right time, right situation. So you always have to hedge yourself a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because you and I know there's so many stories you see in the industry, whereas right time, right place, they get a lot of heat in the industry. Like, they get a lot of attention. They might even get an opportunity to make a feature film, studio backed, everything. But then you know what? They make one and you never hear from them again.
Correct. Happens all the time.
Like, no, there's a lot of case studies, a lot of stories that I go, what happened to that guy? Or like, you'll hear stories like, these guys made this amazing visual effects short and now they're in development. But then their development hell, they had office space on the studio. Sure. Nothing happens.
No, but that's the way this town eats people like that up. This town eats talent up. It's insane.
So if we break it down back to principles again, if you are always a director, filmmaker, but you're really honing your craft all the time, making solid, stories in a film content world, then no matter what happens from there, you still have your core talent in place. I just, I don't know what happened to these other, all these filmmakers that had this, the golden ticket in their hand, and they never moved forward with it. The great thing about at least David Sandberg is that he's capitalized. Again, there's a few people like, can you capitalize on the opportunities that are in front of you, and are you ready for them? It's like that whole 10-year overnight success, which takes 10 years to get. That 10 years of working towards, are you really, honed in on your craft that way?
The problem is, I think, with a lot of these guys that do get the opportunities and do get these like magical stories, and there was a lot of film directors from the 90s that had this meteoric rise, and then they just fizzle out or they're gone, and that was the end of it. I mean, Kevin Smith was that basically at the beginning. He did Clerks, then he had a big studio movie called Mallrats that died a miserable death, and he was pretty much gone. They just wrote him off. And then he went to Miramax and got $150,000 from them to go make Chasing Amy. And that movie brought him back because it was that good. It's arguably still probably one of his best movies ever, in my opinion. But that was exactly what happens. And I feel that when you're only focused on that employee standpoint, which, by the way, I want to make it very clear, if Kevin Feige wants to call me about a Marvel movie, I will take the meeting. I'm not against that at all. I think I would love to play in that sandbox. But while you're chasing that dream, I'm in the camp of building something that can support you. Building something that can support your dream. I was able to continue my directing, chasing my directing dream and being a filmmaker because I opened up a post-production company, because I was a freelance post-production editor and then colorist and post-supervisor and so on. That was my foundation. It's creating that foundation. And I would much rather, instead of, having a taco truck as my foundation of revenue, creating something within the industry where I can learn and grow to build that foundation to still continue to chase that dream. And I feel that a lot of these guys that go into that world, they don't have a backup plan. Like, this is all they were going after. This is it. And if it doesn't work, if they you get to the show, you're at the show, and it's like the baseball player. All he does is work and work and work to play baseball all his life. And they get to the majors and they blow out their knee. And that's it. It happens all the time to athletes, whether NBA, NFL, or Major League Baseball, or any of it. All their lives, they've been focusing on going after the one goal of playing in the big leagues, which would be playing in the studio system for us. And when something happens, you blow out a knee, something happens, you can't play anymore, or you're basically, you're that movie that they gave you, it didn't do financially what they wanted you to do, so you're gone now. Now you've got to figure something else out, and that's where so many of these guys fail. You've got to have a foundation to build off of, to launch yourself off of. If not, you're basically playing on the tightrope, And look, how many filmmakers we know that did 4, 5, 6 movies, but then they have, whatever happened to Wolfgang Peterson? He's a great filmmaker. Where's Wolfgang? Where's Wolfgang? What happened to Wolfgang? It's called the Poseidon. Once Poseidon bombed, he got put in director jail. He's made some of the great movies of our generation. And Wolfgang Peterson, I haven't heard from him. There's so many of these directors who are gone after certain amounts. And if they don't have anything else to back up from, they better save the money that they did when they were eating high in the hog. Because if they don't, then, all of a sudden, unfortunately, you turn into Gary Coleman. Who was making millions of dollars and then essentially crashed and burned. He was a security guard after a while because he didn't have a foundation. They didn't build something out for them. That's a different scenario, but you understand the analogy. You have to have that foundation to be able to build something off. If I want to go real quickly, I always like using this example on the kid star thing. The Olsen twins. You have the Olsen twins and you have Gary Coleman, okay? Both pretty much the biggest stars of their time. And also Urkel. Let's throw Urkel in there as well. I forgot his name, but Urkel, the kid actor played Urkel. So Gary Coleman went down generally the path that is legendary, mythical. He was the biggest TV star of his time. He had a run on a very big show. He made millions of dollars. And then because the parents weren't there to build something for him, help him build a foundation, help him build a career, he basically crashed and burned. And unfortunately, what happened to Gary happened to Gary. The Olsen twins had good people around them and figured out, hey, let's start building something ourselves. And they started making these independent family films starring the girls, straight to VHS. And then after their whole build, they built out such an empire that it was over $1 billion, in just $1 billion in worth of the Olsen twins empire. That's insanity. But they built a foundation, because once Full House was done, they had somewhere to go, and they knew that their window of opportunity might not last for 10, 15 years. It might be only 6, 7, 8, 10 years total from the moment where they started to their early teens, maybe early 20s, and they're done. That's it. They can't generate revenue anymore, so they built that foundation. And I heard from, I don't know if it was from you. Was it from you? Were you the one that met Urkel?
No, I didn't know.
Okay, so it was another filmmaker who met Urkel at some talk, and he came up to him and he was talking to him, and Urkel told him, he's like, "Oh, I'm in real estate. I own like 6 buildings. My parents bought all these buildings for me with the money," because he was making obscene amounts of money. Like the last 4 years of that show, because the first few he was like screwed because he had a bad contract. But like the last 4 or 5 years, he was making millions. And his parents were smart enough. He's like, "Nope, we're gonna buy you." And he bought him like 6, 7, 8 apartment buildings, and that generates so much revenue for him that he's good, because he has a foundation. He has a business that's paying him, and then he can go off and direct, and he can go off and act, and he can do whatever he want. That's the basic principle of what we're talking about here.
That story scenario is great, because you'll find a lot of people like that. There's somebody we know that's in the film education space, and that's been around for a long time. And I think it's Dov Simmons, I think. But apparently I think he's made a lot of his money in real estate.
Most of his money is in real estate, yeah.
Yeah, most of his money. I met an actor. I was acting. So for a while there, I've been, making a part-time living up here in Portland as an actor, and I was on the show Grimm, and I was working along this character actor who's been in everything from Iron Man to American Sniper. He always plays like either FBI agent, a military guy.
He's got that look, yeah.
Nondescript white guy that just plays those types of characters.
Real quick, what is your description, sir? What is your stereo?
So I was fortunate. Again, talking about a little lottery ticket. That's primarily white actors, and since I'm half Asian, half white, I had this. They've come to describe my type as the ambiguous, non-threatening ethnic.
I love that. It's like non-threatening ethnic, but that is a perfect niche for you, and that got you work, because there was not many other. There was little competition in that space where you live.
So it's important to understand. Like I could help sell a lot of products. That because my look or type was you can go either way wherever you want to go. Like I was not threatening enough that is going to deprement your product selling.
I can't sell your products, so I couldn't. I'm much more threatening than you are, sir. Yeah. Just my facial. I'm always that's not going to work.
Well, it's funny because all this stuff's going on. I remember being I was paid an actor's salary for being a spokesperson for a credit card company, a banking company, beverage companies, like all these different companies. So again, the ability to turn it on its head and say, I'm going to make my own show where I'm the spokesperson for my own company, which happens to be the real estate services. So sometimes I've been asked to be like a spokesperson for some other people's real estate companies prior. So I said, well, why don't I just get the license? So there's the through line right there. But when I was working on that episode, this particular actor, it was, for any other actor, his resume is very impressive. And he's been able to be in all these major projects before, not a known name, just working actor. And he was mentioning like, oh, no, I'm a full-time real estate agent down in LA. Like this, I just do this when it comes up. I thought to myself, that's all I need to know. You know what I mean? It's like, it's one of those
I'm
things,
out. I'm out. I'm going to do this.
No, it's just like, it changed my perspective. Like, you need these moments. And this is, hopefully this conversation is these moments for people listening.
Yep.
It's like, you need to hear these things so that it's a shift, so that you can look at it differently, but still feel whole. Like you finally felt like Alex Ferrari. Like, this is you running, you're hustling the world of indie film hustle. You know, I was on a self-exploration trying to find out what is the secret to all this, and then how do I apply it for myself moving forward. So a lot of this stuff does it mean that I'm not going to, make the next, narrative or feature? No, it just means that for the last 3 years, I had to like get my home base squared away first,
Yeah, you have to build your foundation. You have to build the foundation.
Build your foundation, and then you move forward. And the great thing, again, we'll talk about really quick some other case studies. I know that we're running long in this one, but
no, please, guys, it's the last one. It doesn't matter. Scott, just go. Do you have somewhere to go, Scott? I don't. I'm stuck here in quarantine as well. So let's just talk, sir. Let's just talk.
Okay, so hopefully you're getting a lot of stuff out of this. So we can talk about some other case studies, understanding your foundation, meaning that the great quote that I always love is someone said it's from Mike Tyson. I guess it's from Mike Tyson. The one that says, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Amen.
And I teach that stuff. And we are literally, as a world, we all had a plan.
Yes.
We all got punched in the face by this pandemic. So now we got to pivot. Now we got to change.
Yes.
Now we got to adapt.
Yes.
And we can't sit and cry. Like, buckle down. We are, in some weird ways, this could be like our version of the Great Depression. Like, there was things just change in terms of
it's
perspective.
Absolutely. And my last podcast, I just did this last week, as of this recording, I basically had the first part of my podcast. It was about side hustles in the pandemic times, how to make some money. But I started, I'm like, hey guys, I want you all to know that there are filmmakers and screenwriters out there who are still thinking that when this is over, it's going to go back to the way it was. I have a rude awakening for you. It will not. It will be changed and it will be different. And if you do not pivot and do not change, you're thinking about how things are going. Nobody knows how it's going to end up. Nobody knows in 6 months where we're going to be. But you have to be aware and be just kind of like getting ready to kind of like take advantage of opportunities that present themselves, because in these moments in time is where the big changes, where out of the ashes come the new evolutions, the new things that take us forward as an industry. Like, look, in 2008, streaming started to come on board from Netflix, and look at how that completely revolutionized our business. There are moments in time, and this is that moment in time. So you have to think that nothing's going to be the same. I just have to educate myself, take advantage, educate myself, prepare myself, figuring things out. How am I going to think differently? Because if you're thinking the same, you will not make it.
Yeah. And then agreed. Again, we all got punched in the face,
Yes.
So let's move forward. But like at the core, we're talking about foundations and the core principles. One of the things that's great about the filmmaking, or the artistic need, is to be able to tell a story, whatever that format might be. If you are a writer, we know a lot of screenwriters. You have the bulletproof screenwriting or screenplay. Is it screenwriting?
Screenwriting.
Okay. Bulletproof screenwriting. So at the core, you're starting there and saying like, hey, this is important. There is this visceral enjoyment and struggle and pain of crafting a story, and finishing it in a format. If it's written format, like that's the first step. Like you're just excited for somebody to read your script, One of the things I discovered in my time running Film Trooper was that it was so much fun just writing the screenplay for the Cube and then making it. Just the process of doing that and feeling satisfied, going, you know what? There was a beginning, middle, and end. I completed a thought. Like I completed something of this. I reflect on it. I go, my God, look how bad it is. So,
oh man, oh yeah, we all have those moments.
Yeah. So, but when I thought about it, I was like, but I was able to make something for so little money without a crew.
You finished.
I go, what if the story was better? What if the story was better? So that got me back to the core principles of that. But then writing the book, How to Make and Sell Your Film Online and Survive the Hollywood Implosion while doing it, that process, you've written several books since we've known my God, the discipline of sitting down, buckling down, and finishing these chapters is brutal. That last 5-10% is brutal. Like, you can get a lot done, but it's just finishing it.
What's worse for me is the audiobook. It's so brutal. It's so brutal reading your own stuff and performing, and it was horrible. But yes, it's not easy. It's not easy.
So, but what the joy out of that was finishing it, having it in a real paperback form. Like, it's tangible, like, it's something real. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yes, the audiobook too, like, just having all that stuff, it's done. It exists out there. But it got me thinking, like, I remember we're fans of podcasts. Prior to starting my own podcast, I was a fan of the creative writing screenwriting podcast. Goldblum, I think, not Goldblum, Goldberg, forget his last name, Jeff something. He was the host. He did a great job. He did these private screenings in LA, different theaters. And after the movie was finished, they would have this podcast interview for an hour plus with the screenwriter or sometimes the filmmakers. And then he turned that into a Q&A or something in his own podcast. So he left as a senior editor for Creative Screenwriting magazine, and then turn his own podcast into the same format. But one of the guests he had, which I can't remember her name, she was supposedly like a legendary screenwriter who wrote a script that did very well. And they were, in retrospect, interviewing her. But it was really fascinating to hear what she had to say at the end. She says, you know what, if I would have known now what, back then, whatever, like, if the stuff that I know now, which I got to apply back then, she said, instead of just writing the screenplay, I would have written the book. I would have read it like a television. She was already realizing, like, I had control over the content that I created, the license that I created, that she could exploit many different ways. I don't know if your experience, but after writing this book, even though it's not a creative narrative book, like my book and your book, they're information books. But the process of doing it got me thinking, like, wait a minute, the next story that I should be working on, I should make a book version, a narrative story. Then you could turn that into a script, and then you can make your movie, and you can say, hey, this is a movie that's based on the book. And if you know how to work Amazon's book selling algorithms, you could say, this is movies based on the best selling book for 1 week or 1 day.
No, absolutely.
So when I meet screenwriters, I try to tell them, like, is there a way they can turn this into a narrative? And people think like books need to be long prose and they're like 200-300 pages. I want people to go and get the book called A Monster Calls. Remember that movie that came out with the tree, and it was up for a couple of years ago? Well, it's a very touching, sad story. But if you read the book, I'm telling you, it is very short, easy to read. It will change your perspective of what a book really means in terms of the formatting. Because you can read this in that book, that narrative book, and say to yourself, this is a script that just got turned into a narrative in the most creative, simple way. And so now you can create a book from your screenplay. So you have multiple sources that way. And if you're able to become a producer or make the film, and you put together a team, it could be, and you work the understanding what it makes to sell a book online. Listen to Alex's podcast, read his book, read my book, listen to my podcast. Or just go down that rabbit hole. You can see that you can, on a very low budget way, still tell your story, which is the core of it, which is like the creative release of, like, I had a thought, I wanted to put it in a narrative form, I did it. It exists in a tangible way, and it's out there being marketed properly.
I'll tell you, when I launched Rise of the Film Entrepreneur, the day that I put it out for pre-sale, I also launched an entire website, an entire podcast, a YouTube channel, everything at once. And I remember when you called me, like, dude, what are you doing, man? How do you? So I always love when you call or text me, like, what? Because I already realized that This isn't going to be a one-off. I can build something around the concept of being a film entrepreneur and provide more value to my audience other than just the book. The only thing I'm missing is the course, which I am working on, which is the online course on going deeper and doing a deeper dive than the book does. And that would kind of create the holistic ecosystem of the film entrepreneur method. It's so, I can't explain to you how valuable that is, because I have multiple revenue streams coming in off the book, which then I used my movies, and I'm making more money off the books than I am off the movies that I talk about in my books, and so on. And there's just so many different revenue streams coming in from this one idea, this one source, as opposed to the normal way of going about it, which is where you write the book, you find a distributor, or a publisher, you go to them, you get 10% if you're lucky, and you own nothing, and that's it. And you pray that they're going to put it out there, and if they don't, you're screwed. And that would have been the normal way of going about it. But I decided, no, I'm going to take control of this book, where my first book wasn't that. I did go with a traditional distributor or publisher with that. That's another podcast for another day. But I take this, and now I'm able to generate monthly revenue streams that are still coming in and surprising me monthly on what I'm able to generate coming off of that. Do you know the story of J.K. Rowling and her film entrepreneurial inclinations with the Harry Potter series? Do you know what she owns and what she doesn't own?
Could share with us. I don't know all the details.
Okay, so obviously when she wrote her first book, she was nobody. She was on welfare. Nobody wanted the book and so on. Then it blew up. Obviously, it got picked up and it kind of exploded from there. She did own the.
I do know that. I just want to interject there. Like, if I understand correctly, when it eventually got to a publisher, these publishers have relationships with producers. The smart, savvy producers, film producers, know what books are on the horizon before they're ever released to the public.
Yeah.
So I think if I understand correctly, the film producer got wind of this manuscript before they even published it. So it was on the radar to be made an option into a film anyway. So it's one of those things like that. That's like its own sub industry. Is like,
oh yeah, Jurassic Park was that way. Michael Crichton. Spielberg had it before the book ever came out.
Right. So in terms of how that industry works, so I'm sorry, but I just want to make sure I got that in there before people understand, like, there's another sub-industry where people are increasing their probability of successful project because they are injecting themselves into the decision makers for mass media, and you might find yourself down that track one day, but just see how it works.
But just so understand, so she was smart enough to understand that she needed to control some stuff. So I don't know the details, but I know that she had leverage, meaning that if they wanted more books, they're going to have to do what she says. So as far as the movie rights and so on, they made so much money that they basically gave her the keys to the castle, essentially. And that it rarely happens. But the one thing that she has that I had no idea she owns the ebook of all she owns the rights 100% to all the ebooks for Harry Potter. And it's sold exclusively through her website. So when you go to Amazon, this is how big Harry Potter is, that Jeff Bezos had to kowtow to her. When you go to Amazon and you click on buy an ebook of Harry Potter, it goes to her website. And that one move alone made her a multi-billionaire. Because of that move, and on top of the revenue and all the licensing, and she gets, I don't know how much the percentage she gets off the merch and stuff like that, but I'm sure it's good. It's good. But that was thinking, she was thinking differently already. She was already like, you know what, I'm going to control this, and this, because I have a very unique scenario here. And that's what happened with George Lucas. But George did it really slickly with Star Wars. He's like, look, don't pay me a whole extra lot of money. Look, I'll take a cut on my directing. Just give me the sequel rights and this merchandising stuff. You guys don't even do stuff. The last big thing that came out was Dr. Dolittle, and it died on merchandise. Let me just have the merchandise. And they said, sure, no problem. And that one moment, it was like Bill Gates and IBM. IBM's like, Bill's like, you know what? I don't want to sell you my software of DOS. I need you to license it.
License it.
I need you to, that one moment in time created the richest man in the world, created one of the biggest fortunes in the history of this world. And it was just thinking just a little bit differently.
Let's another way to think differently, but it seems tangible, like reachable right now. Like for anybody listening, this is what you could do. I'm going to use this as a case study from Aaron Mahnke, who does the Lore podcast. So LORE, it's like, scary stories. So the big thing to look at this case study is he's a writer. He writes like scary books. And because it's just him writing, he's able to write his books, upload them to Amazon. He can make a hardback copy, a paperback copy, like all the services are available, Amazon, audiobook, everything. So what he does is he wrote a few novels, original, fictitious, scary story novels, but he decided to start a podcast. His podcast is called Lore, LORE, and what it was is sort of like almost like a glorified Wikipedia research. So he, in his efforts to create his art is writing books on scary stories, is he has to do research on folklore and all this type of stuff. And in his process of doing this research, he turns it into a podcast. So boom, the podcast for some reason took off. It was just the right niche. It got picked up. If you understand how to work like the podcast launch, like for a while there was like if you wanted to get high rankings in Apple podcast, you had like 8 weeks to make something happen. So a little bit of luck, little high probability. He was creating his stuff. It got picked up. It got a lot of followers following his Scary Story podcast, and it started taking off. But he was using the podcast. It's so blatant to let people know that he writes scary stories and he can find the links afterwards.
Yep.
So he was doing the Film Troopreneur or the Film Trooper. Like, by the way, it's funny because you have Film Troopreneur and mine is Film Trooper. Because for a while there, I was messing around with different taglines like empowering the film entrepreneur. So we're all in the same. You and I are in the same mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he was doing this. He's not a filmmaker, but he was a storyteller. And he had different means to tell his story. And this thing takes off. All of a sudden, like some of the producers from Walking Dead are listening to his podcast. They turn, he gets, one thing leads to another, and he gets this into an Amazon series. So if you go onto Amazon Prime, there is an anthology called Lore. So they've taken an existing audience that had a following on his Lore podcast. That was enough to get the right meetings in place to turn it into a series on Amazon. It hasn't blown up, but it doesn't have to. Doesn't have to. What we're saying here, this is a real case study that doesn't necessarily have to do with a lot like luck or high probability. This is just somebody I like to write scary stories. I'm going to put another aspect of my world out there in a podcast to share my research, but I'll do it creatively. But then I'll use the podcast as a self-published author to drive people to my book sales.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Let's be honest. I'm going to uncover it. My podcast ended up turning out to be like a free content marketing advertisement for my book. And I still make money on my book today, on a monthly basis. And Alex will probably attest to, with all the different revenue streams he has with Indie Film Hustle and all the offshoots of it, those are revenue streams that are, making monthly. And we're not talking retirement money. We're just talking, like for me, I just make enough money to pay for the online services to keep it going. Like it's not like I'm like, buying houses from this stuff. It's like you're not seeing that kind of money, and you're not going to see that kind of money with your film per se, if we break it down. But at least the Lore, Aaron Mahnke's, if I think is pronounced his last name correctly, that is a tangible case study.
Absolutely.
That we can wrap our heads around saying that's something that you can chip at and make something work.
And in the book, I use the case study of like if you're a horror director and you want to make zombie movies, would it be cool? Would it make sense to create a zombie podcast or a podcast that leverages the biggest zombie property on the planet, which is Walking Dead. So maybe you have a show that talks about the show or about zombies and build up an audience of zombie lovers through your podcast. Oh, and by the way, I also am a filmmaker who makes zombie movies. And then, oh, guys, I know we just saw The Walking Dead. My new movie's coming out next week on Amazon and on iTunes or wherever. If you want exclusive to this, get to blah, blah, blah. And then, oh, by the way, I also make zombie t-shirts and zombie hats and zombie merch and zombie, all this stuff, because he's been able to understand who his audience is, his niche audience. Like I say, the riches are in the niches. He understands his niche audience. He's creating content and being of service to that audience. And then he's also selling them his art. And by that time that you've given them so much free content, so much amazing service, that there is a percentage of the audience that will reciprocate and will purchase your merch, will purchase your movies, your offsprings off the stuff of the movies. Maybe you have events, maybe you have zombie get-togethers. There's so many ways to monetize and to build revenue streams that is not only just about the money, it's about being of service to the community. If you are not of service, this does not work. If you walk into it only thinking about money, it will not work. You have to think about being of service, and everything else, when you are able to be of service to a community and you're trying to build a business to keep your art or yourself, to sustain yourself, then the money will come. You have to start thinking about how you can provide that service even better to that audience. But that's a great example. Look, you and me both. Podcasting it's my I'm not a YouTube star by any stretch, because there was a lot of competition in that space. But when I jumped into the podcasting space, which you're older than I am as far as being in the podcasting space, you were already around when I jumped in, but I've been in it almost 5 years, and there wasn't a lot of competition. There wasn't a lot of filmmaking podcasts. Now there's a ton trying to do it, but I'm one of the last standing. From our time, when I started, there's a lot of guys that were around when I walked in are not there anymore. They're just not, because this is hard. And if you can't figure out how to monetize, if you can't figure out how to be of service and then monetize that audience in one way, shape, or form to benefit them and benefit yourself, you can't keep going unless it's just a hobby. And when it's a hobby, it's a tough hustle, man. Oh, episode a week, episode a week. And I was doing 3. I do 3 to 4 episodes a week now through all my podcasts. It's a lot, but yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Well, the fact that you brought up the zombie analogy or the case study, I think that's great for people. I want to unpack that a little bit more, because we get into wanting to do a movie or tell a story about a certain subject. Yeah. And this thought of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to live in this world for a long time. We know a lot of filmmakers that are still, they made a good film but they're at the same time, it's 5, 6, almost 10 years of the same subject matter, because it takes that long to build traction of something they made. Where, creatively, sometimes you just like, I want to make something, be done with it, move on to something creative, another thing. Sure. And the idea that you have to build an audience for each subject matter is daunting.
Oh, it's huge. It's monstrous. Yeah,
it's daunting. It's hard. So, like you said, like if you're going to be if you're a zombie enthusiast, then that could be something that you're good with. One of the things I offer with people, come in to Film Trooper is I offer a hack. Like, how do you build your audience quickly? And the hack is make a fan film, like like Star Wars fan films. Some people start with Star Wars.
Yeah, Batman versus aliens, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you do a Star Wars fan film, you can get a lot more followers to your movie, and then if you can get a little bit of following out of that, you can tell them the next project you're working on. That might, as long as it's in the same ilk of like sci-fi, fantasy or whatever it is. So that was a big struggle for me. If we're going to break down case studies and things like that, is like I reached a point with independent filmmakers where I don't know if I could service them, be of service to them, as opposed to service them. But anyway, be of service to them, because I was watching what you were doing, like, I think Alex has got it. Like, he's going bananas. Man. Like, I may not be able to offer as much, more than where I've hit this crossroad where I was like, I became more interested in like exploring another audience. And so the ability to create a show, like my little show around the neighborhood, again, started from scratch. I was interested in neighborhood stories, and that allowed me to just focus on that. And then that allowed me to meet all these different people in town, which again, I understand that's my byproduct as real estate. But you're talking about being of service to somebody. A lot of times, like, I'll do the show and people want to talk to me about other things, but by just meeting them and helping them with, right now we're talking about musicians being hit hard. We're talking about like, if they can't make money just selling their music online because there's no money in it,
or merch,
they have
or
to rely
else.
on live merchandise or live performances. All these musicians that I know locally that were making a regular living playing gigs, they can't play gigs anymore. So now they're online. And now you see all these Facebook Live, footage of somebody playing guitar, like, send me some money and things like that. It's like, it's getting a little daunting, the virtual tip jar. So I'm working with some local musicians, helping them out. And, I'm not being paid a lot, but I realize I'm helping them out. They're both Hall of Fame inductees to the Oregon Music Hall of Fame here. So I'm helping tell a story of like their life in music, and then they would play music, and it's just a standalone video that has like tip jar links to where they go. Well, because I was just helping some people out locally, again, being of service with the skills that I have, that end up turning into like spawning like, turning into a little bit more of a documentary than I expected, Good.
On
top of that,
right.
But on top of that, it's turning into but remember, my higher price service is real estate. Well, it looks like it's turning into a real estate deal as well. So it's like, it's like I didn't go out like hard pressed and selling it. It was simply being of service to a community. Again, breaking it down to the audience. Like, I had to like do some deep soul searching of like, which audience can I serve in a long term? Like, I'm thinking 30 years. That I'm going to be enjoying each time I get out there and do it. I think Film Trooper kind of reached an apex for me, where it's like, I'm not too sure I'm enjoying, because I don't feel like I'm just gathering and curating information. I'm not applying it. And the filmmakers I'm talking to, doesn't seem like enough of them are applying it, So it's like, I got to move away from like filmmakers, and I got to apply what we're talking about. And then I have to find a new audience, an audience that I really truly think I could serve for the next 30 years and do that. And so that's a question I think a lot of people have to ask themselves. Like, if you find yourselves going down a path of making a film, can you live with this subject matter and the audience around it for the next 10 years? It's something.
It all depends on your perspective. Like, I know some horror guys who just love horror movies, and and it's not a big stretch from zombie to horror. So if you're in that same kind of niche in general, the horror niche, if you're a horror guy and you're going to do horror for the rest of your life, I mean, Guillermo del Toro's probably not going to make a comedy, though I would love to see a comedy like that by Guillermo del Toro. But generally, he's good. He's going to be horror for the rest of his life, and he's very comfortable with that, and that's no issues with that at all. So you have to ask yourself the question, where am I going to be in 10 years? Do I want to keep doing this? A lot of times you don't know that answer, man. Like, you remember I owned an olive oil and vinegar, shop and a company. If you would have told me I was going to open up that, 8 years ago, I would have said, you're crazy, you're nuts. But I did. You never know what happens during the path. But this is one thing that is true. If tomorrow I decide to stop, creating amazing amounts of content that I do for Indie Film Hustle, Bulletproof Screenwriting, or Film Entrepreneur, this machine will continue to run without me at the helm. It might drop in revenue, but the machine will continue to run while I build something else. So if you're able to build a machine that runs in that niche, you can still service that niche and service that machine and keep that machine going because it's generating enough revenue for you while you're off making another movie, that's not a horror movie, making or opening up an olive oil store or going into real estate or whatever that other opportunity might be. But you have a business that's still creating money for yourself and still generating revenue while you're still able, because you've created so much content. I mean, look, I got close to over 500 podcasts throughout all my podcasts. That's a lot of content. That's just the podcast, not to mention the videos and all the other stuff that I do. That's a lot of that's evergreen. That's going to keep finding, I got articles from 2015 that are really popular and people still find it all the time, and it's evergreen stuff. So if you're able to build up a business in that niche that you're doing and generating those revenue streams, there's no reason why you can't pull back from that, go down the other path, and either let that do its thing or just feed it every once in a while, or hire someone to feed it, maybe hire someone to take it over, where you're still generating revenue and you're still servicing that audience, but now you're moving into another direction in your life, because you never know what's going to happen. Like I said, if you would have told me I was going to open up an olive oil store, I'd be like, what? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Still doesn't make any sense. It was a dark time in my life. I don't want to talk about it. But you never know. But again, the foundation is sound. If you're able to build a business with your films in that audience, then there's no reason why that can't keep going. If you've done it correctly, if you've built a very strong foundation up. If you haven't built a strong foundation up or wasn't making enough money when you were up 100%, then it doesn't make any sense. It has to kind of die off. But look, I have a great example. If everyone listening knows Wes Craven, the famous horror director who kind of fell into horror. Horror wasn't his thing, really wasn't the biggest thing in his life. He liked it and he enjoyed doing it, but he eventually wanted to break out of horror. And the only time that I know of that he did a movie outside the horror genre was after he did Scream. They really wanted him to do Scream 2. He's like, okay, I'll do Scream 2, but you've got to give me a movie. And that movie was called Music of the Heart, which was about a drama about 500 violins that go to a low-income school. It starred Meryl Streep and Gloria Estefan and had like NSYNC in it. And like that was the movie he wanted to make. And it's, by the way, wonderful film. I enjoyed that film a lot. It was really a wonderful film. But it didn't do box office numbers. And guess what? He didn't get a chance again. So now he goes back and he does Scream 2 and he continues his path down that road. But I know, because I was really good friends with his personal assistant at the time, that he really wanted to break out of that, especially as he got older. As he got like what excited me at 20 does not excite me now at my age at 45. It just doesn't. The filmmaker I was in my 20s is not the filmmaker I am in my 40s. So you have to give yourself the opportunity to adjust. But if you're smart and you build your foundation and you build revenue streams, whether that be in the business or buy apartment buildings and have revenue stream, have cash flow coming in to kind of support your creative endeavors, that is the dream, that is the goal, and there's no reason why you can't have your cake and eat it too, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. So here's some other case studies that are things like impressions that made a big impact on me over the years of running, Film Trooper and the podcast and different people I've talked to. One of the guys was this fella that I was in a mastermind with for a while. He's out in New York. He runs Bloop Animation. So if you go to YouTube, Bloop Animation, Mormor Rose. He just started off doing like being a fan of animation, 3D animation, Pixar animations, Disney animation. And then he used his growth in his YouTube channel, giving short tutorials. And then he turned into selling courses, beginning animation courses. And then that led to building more courses. And that to building courses on the different software, because not every animation software is the same. But at the same time, he's making short films. So he's like, I'm making this short film. So he's a filmmaker. We're talking an animator that made his own animation, but behind all that stuff, he had a YouTube presence that was giving edutainment. So it was educating, but also entertaining. But he had a mechanism in place where he was selling his courses. So this builds this whole company. And because we were in the mastermind together, there was a lot of years. He was also getting hired as a contract for hire animator at different studios. So he's making like his day money as an animator for contract for hire. And then at night he was, or whatever, on the side hustle. His side hustle was Bloop Animation, building courses, doing YouTube videos. And then that grew. So then he didn't have to take on as much contract work. And then he started meeting other animators, and they started collectively, doing their own other short films. So, and it just keeps growing. And new courses come out. So it's just, the whole point is that he built the Film Trooper system in place. Mm-hmm. He gets to make his animated films, but there's a mechanism behind it that allows this to continue.
You gotta pay to play, brother. You gotta pay to play. Unless you're rich or you got, a trust fund somewhere. You've got to figure out how to make some money. This is the world we live in, man. Unfortunately. So this is what has to be done. I know it's not sexy. It's not sexy building up a build. I think it's sexy, but a lot of people, they're like, I don't want to build the work of building a business. I'm an artist. I'm like, okay, man. Then you know what? Da Vinci. Is it Da Vinci or Michelangelo? One of the two. I think it was Da Vinci, who, he was an artist. But he wasn't a starving artist. The whole concept of the starving artist is such BS. Because Da Vinci was an extremely savvy businessman, had multiple revenue streams coming in. He was extremely wealthy. He was probably one of the most wealthy people around in his town in Italy. Because he was doing a million different things and he was hustling all over the place. So he was able to generate all this revenue and still be able to create the art that he wanted to create sometimes it was commission, sometimes it wasn't. But that concept is something that we, in this world that we live in today, have to understand. If you want to be in show business, you need to understand the business. As our friend Suzanne Lyons says, the word show and there's the word business, and the word business has twice as many letters as the word show. And there's a reason. So if you don't understand the business, you will not get to do the show.
It's interesting you brought up Da Vinci. I read his book, the Walter Isaacson book on him. Yeah. It was fantastic, very long. But right, he got into plays. He was just not a painter. He was a lot of other things.
Architect, everything.
But one of the other aspects that you brought up that I want to make sure the people listening is there's a thing about a champion. We talked about early on about David F. Sandberg, how James Wan came in as a champion. There is this thing that's true out there. Like you said, there is, in the world of filmmaking, there is that lottery ticket. But it's essentially, are you creating good enough content, good enough films that are interesting enough, and are you getting them in front of the right people, increasing your probability of moving to the next level? Because what you're looking for is that champion. Somebody, if you look through the trajectory of all your favorite filmmakers, there's always you realize wait, there's always somebody behind it that was really helping it push forward.
Oh yeah.
Walt Disney, without his brother Roy, who was the banker, the logical one, the financier, the one who's making things happen, Walt Disney would not be as successful as he was.
Correct.
If you want to be an artist, you better partner up with a trusted, and the key word is trusted, because a lot of artists get taken advantage of, no matter what format you're in, music, art, movies, whatever, acting. People will get taken advantage of if you don't have the right champion in place. And so you have to do what you need to do to increase your probability of finding the right champion, or putting yourself in the place to get to the next level, the right champion. So that's one of the major takeaways that I got from running the podcast, is really breaking down sort of that through line, that's interesting if you want to get to the next level that way.
I found my perspective on the champion is that I got tired of chasing the champion and trying to try to get the attention of the champion in the traditional ways. So I just decided to create bait for that champion to find me. And that bait could be an amazing short film that happens to fall on this person's desk. That happens, but that again is a lottery ticket in today's world, where if you build enough noise, you build an audience, you build something that makes you stand out from the crowd, because everybody and their mother has a good short film, but not everybody and their mother has an audience around the art or the work of a filmmaker and or company. And that is the new way, in my opinion, to get attention in Hollywood. Hollywood cares. I was talking to an actor, very seasoned actor, friend of mine, who had coffee the other day, and he was telling me he was in a casting, and he was telling me how the world changed, because he used to be one of those actors who he played like the bus driver, the landlord. He just plays that guy, and he would be able to play the dad in these national spots. He'd do 1 or 2 national spots a year. He's good the rest of the year, offer residuals. Because the business has changed so much that residuals are going away, actors are getting, it's going to become worse and worse for actors as far as residual payments are concerned. He was walking in doing a casting, and he was there helping a friend of theirs. He was basically just reading lines for the other people. He's like, hey, do you want to come in? We'll pay you X dollars to sit there and read lines all day. And he did. And he'd sit there, and it would just be the producers. And the second before the person would walk in, they're like, John Smith's coming in, 75. And then it was like, Betsy's coming in, 225. And then another, 10. And these numbers would just be spread out. And then like at lunchtime, he pulled them all aside, like, hey, what are the numbers? He goes, oh, that's their Instagram followers. That's their Instagram followers. Yep. Because even for actors, you can't just be an amazing actor. That's not enough. You can't just be the best looking, the most talented, right for the part. It doesn't matter anymore. It does to a certain extent. Of course, let me just put it this way. All the things I just said, that's the starting point. Before, that used to be the finish line. That's the starting point. You just have to understand that there's at least another 10 people who have as much talent as you, are as good looking as you, and are as perfect for the part as you. And the only thing that differentiates you guys is your following, is the audience that follows you. As stupid as that might be, that's what it is. Period. And that's the world the actors are starting to walk into, and they have been in that world for a little bit now. But now filmmakers are going to have to start doing that as well, because their talent is great, and there's a lot of talented filmmakers out in the world. You're talking about generational. For the last 100, like alive, how many directors are there who are capable of creating amazing art and amazing cinema? There's just hundreds of thousands, if not millions, throughout the last 80 years, let's say, who are still alive and able to do it. And also the new actors, all the new directors and filmmakers that are coming up. So there's just too much competition now. Right. But if you're able to control that audience, if you're able to build something, whether that be a book that you own, an IP that you own, something that makes you stand out and want them to come to you, then you're in a position of power in that situation. And it's just you're not begging for an opportunity. You're having a conversation about being a partner. And there's a very distinct difference of having a conversation like, sir, can I please have some money for my movie, sir? Sir, with your hat out. Or that same person walking in, hey, I want to do business with you. That's a different conversation. And that's the place where I've figured out that makes most sense for me, is to partner with people, not to beg for opportunities. I create my own opportunities. And that's where you have to be in this world, I think.
Right. And I want to definitely do the yes and. Because I think there's some great things there put there. Yes. Yes. And because now people listening to this, like said, like, this is a marathon. This is like everything you're talking about. You and I, this is our opportunity to do this massive brain dump onto the audience to close out this show for me. Mm-hmm. But to do the yes and, it's true, which is I brought up again, like hacks. Like, well, how does somebody get all those Instagram followers? How does somebody get a following if you're starting from scratch? And that's why we talked about the advent of a hack, which is simply, okay, make a fan film. Like if you're a filmmaker, we're talking about filmmaking here. So you make a fan film, and I just put Star Wars out there.
Sure.
But Star Wars, because there's already a built-in following for that kind of content. And it's the same adage of saying, like, if you want to be the leader of the parade, just jump in front of the parade. The analogy there is, instead of working your way from the very back line of the parade, trying to work your way up to the top of the front of the parade, if you jump in front of the leader of the parade, that means that there's an audience already exists, a following already exists. So how do you just jump in front? This hack of creating a fan film, like a Star Wars fan film, means that you can almost guarantee, if you do it correctly, by just making it for free, putting it up online and tagging all the right places in Star Wars and all the fandoms that are out there in Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, that you'll probably get about 25,000 views on your movie. But if it's really good, it gets reshared and you could do millions. We're seeing Star Wars fan films in the millions of views. And your job is to make sure you have a mechanism in place to do what we call, in the world of online marketing, the conversion rate. So let's talk about the conversion rate real quick so people get their heads wrapped around that. The days of, like, when you get mailers, like advertisements in the mail, like go to Bed Bath & Beyond or whatever it might be, here's your coupon. In that world of marketing, direct mail marketing, or they call direct to consumer marketing, the marketers are only hoping to get, they're expecting to get about a 1% to 2% conversion rate, meaning that for every 100 mailers they put out, they're going to get a 1%,
one or two people are going to show up.
Yeah, that's maybe just show up. That doesn't mean they're going to actually buy anything.
Right.
So that's why they have to do it in bulk. Why you have to have these vast numbers of like 1 million, hundreds of thousands, because then if you do just the mathematics, just count on it 1% to 2%. And does that actually work? Weirdly, it does. If I looked at the one thing that I've noticed, like, you can take a look, like, if you have a mechanism in place for your film, for me, The Cube was I have the trailer for the movie online for years. And over time, you can do like a breakdown of like how many trailer views your movie gets, do about a 1% to 2% conversion rate. That's how many people are probably going to buy your film or rent it. So you have to decide, like, if I'm renting it for 99 cents or if I'm selling it for $10 and I'm only getting 20 people, do the math. You're not going to make your money back unless you have some other mechanism in place. So some of the other case studies we have in terms of, by having a Star Wars fan film or a fan film of some sort, you jump in front of the parade, you get like 25,000 views on your short film. Is there a way to do a 1% to 2% conversion of that following to your actual website, to the behind the scenes things you're offering, to anything about how you made the film, to get them onto a list? We call it the email list. Get them so that they're following you, so that you can follow up with them later with your own original movie. Hopefully it's of the same genre, so they're not totally thrown off.
It has to be the same. It has to be the same genre.
It has to be something.
It has to be something similar until you build up enough street cred or reputation that you could jump genres, and like Kubrick, or those or Spielberg, or these people. Like, for a while, Spielberg was not allowed to do anything other than fantasy action adventure films. Then he said, no, I'm going to do Color Purple. And then I'm going to do Empire of the Sun. I don't care. And to the point where he then did Schindler's List and Jurassic Park in the same year, and he was good. But go ahead.
No. So that's right. So that we're looking at like this thing, understanding conversion rate, understanding the way to get in front of an audience. Another case in point, we can use an industry, something like music, something more relevant of today. Tori Kelly, this singer songwriter. She auditioned for American Idol, was told by Simon Cowell that she has like one of the most annoying voices. This pretty girl from San Diego, but she was, changed by that. That was her plan. She got punched in the face. She got Mike Tyson, that the world changed for her. But she started doing cover songs on YouTube. Yeah. She worked on her craft, learned how to play the guitar better. So she, talk about jumping in front of the parade, which is simply like, what is the most relevant popular song going on right now? So a YouTube artist I'll do a cover of it. So they get a following, because then, if somebody sees like, well, whatever the popular song is now, there's somebody did a cover of it. and then you really like that person, and she gets this following, and then she was able to say, I'm going to be releasing my next album, or my own album. And then people realize her genius. She has like one of the most amazing voices in the industry. And the same thing happened if you're talking about actors. Somebody or a personality, like an on-screen personality, Michelle Phan, she did makeup tutorials on YouTube. Hey girls, like here's how you do this. Those are super popular. We're talking about conversion rate. Well, she did like how to do like makeup for like a Lady Gaga video because that's where the parade was. She piggybacked, jumped in front of that audience. Her YouTube subscribers jumped up to whatever, a couple million, right? Conversion rate, 1 to 2% converts into really dedicated fans. So even though she had a YouTube following of a couple million, I think the conversion rate got down to like, she was offering exclusive, like, hey, if you want to get pre-made like makeup packages sent to your house, join my club, and it's like $10 a month. So she has this free YouTube channel. She's got a subscriber base of whatever, a couple million. The conversion rate, 1-2%. She was looking at like 75,000 people that signed up. Now do the math there. 75,000 times $10 a month. I'll do that real quick. So 75,000.
Oh no, that's $750,000.
$750,000 a month.
Yeah.
She talks about she built her audience.
Yeah.
And guess what? Major makeup companies came calling. She signed $1 billion deal. She has her own makeup line.
Of course she does.
What we're getting at is like these are the metrics or how to do it. So Alex is running Indie Film Hustle and all the other offshoots, Bulletproof Screenplay and Filmpreneur. But
you massacred them. Yeah, but yes, sir.
Thank you. So, it's what we're saying is that these are things that you can try to follow. It's easy to understand when you get your head wrapped around it. It is so hard to execute.
But it's simple. But it's simple though. It's easy. That's the thing. It's easy to grasp, but difficult to do. It's like playing the guitar sounds easy, looks easy. But to actually do it is extreme. To bake a good bread, it's simple ingredients. It's like, because I just baked the bread because we're in quarantine. But it's like 5 or 6 ingredients. And everyone has the same 5 or 6 ingredients. But what do you do to execute it, to do it very, very well? Writing, same thing. All great art forms. It's simple, but to execute it at a very high level is very, very complex.
Executing on, so I make my show. And so like, I'm not doing the YouTuber paradigm. Like it's not just a vlog show, it's people look at it and go, oh, it's kind of like a vlog show. But the thing is like, I'm not trying to bet on the YouTube system, because YouTube, if you want to be a YouTuber, they want you to be producing every day. Yeah. In order to feed the machine, in order to keep your subscriber count high, to keep the notification, to be part of their algorithm that you get to see all the time. And you see a lot of YouTubers burn out after a couple of years. Our boy Casey Neistat, he's the poster child who's done it. He's the first one. If you're a fan of his stuff in YouTube, remember he had a deal with HBO. He was making shows for HBO. He'll be the first one to tell you, he's like, this is the next evolution. To be able to be a YouTuber, like a filmmaker on his own terms, he feels like this is way better than working for like a company, like making content for a company like he did before. But even him, he's gotten to a point where he's had to take a break because burnout's there.
I know, but he was going crazy, dude. He was making so much he was doing a daily vlog, and they were edited. I mean, he's taking 2-3 hours a day to edit. Like, he's a beast. Makes me look. I know you guys. A lot of you guys talk about how I make content. Oh my God, it's nothing. I mean, this man, nothing. Casey Neistat. Oh my God, the definition of hustles. But he's worth. I mean, he sold his app. His like YouTube app or something to CNN for $60 million. Like you know what I mean? Like he's all right. I'm not crying for Casey, but he busted his ass for a decade doing this.
And then again, he's finding other ways to leverage and license and exploit what he's created to other venues.
Correct.
I think for people, we started this episode talking about, I was mentioning like the biggest takeaway I had was that our films, or like all the money's in the action figures from George Lucas, like our films are nothing more than advertisement for something more expensive. If you look at the world of music, I think no better example is Beats by Dre. Here's Dr. Dre, world-renowned rap artist, musician, but it really wasn't until some other champion, entrepreneur, used his likeness, his
leveraged
his world to create these like headphones and sell it for $1 billion to Apple. And if you want to know like the poster child for the ultimate, that might be it.
Well, I mean, like Jessica Alba's not too far behind.
Oh yeah, that is way on the radar.
Yeah, like for everyone not knowing, Jessica Alba, who was the most beautiful and still is, but she was a sex symbol in the early 2000s to mid 2000s. She started a company called The Honest Company because after she had her first child, she couldn't find any really clean baby products. So he's like, hey, there's a hole in the market here. So she created The Honest Company, which I'm sure you've probably seen at Target or Walmart or stuff like that. The company's worth over $1 billion, and she owns 35% of it. And she's basically the poster child for it. So she's the model, she's the one up front, but she's got business partners behind her. But she was able to leverage her celebrity to get her into a business that now makes her so much money that she just acts when she wants to act, and she produces and she directs and she does her own TV shows. She does whatever she wants whenever she wants. Why? Because she has built an infrastructure. She's built a machine that is now generating cash flow for her, revenue streams for her. So she has freedom. She has absolute freedom to do whatever she wants, wherever she wants. And she could give away money. She can do philanthropic things. She can start charities, which she has. She's helping people. Why? Because she built up a business. And it's not something that she's even doing 100% herself. She's got business partners. She's got other people doing a lot of the heavy lifting, the things that she was not good at, but she brought something to the table that they couldn't have done without, because she got the attention. She was on the Today Show. She was on these big shows because she's Jessica Alba, and she was able to leverage her celebrity. And same thing. Look, the entrepreneurs behind Beats by Dre would have tried to come out with headphones. It wouldn't have worked. They need Dre because Dre is the ultimate DJ and has the street cred that everybody said, wait a minute. And then he leveraged all of his artists and all of his labels. So every music video had Beats. I saw the whole documentary about Beats by Dre. Every single music video he produced, all the artists were wearing Beats by Dre. Every single time. So instead of becoming a spokesman, like you said earlier, becoming a spokesman for somebody else's headphones, hey, I'm going to make my own headphones. Puffy did this, or P. Diddy, or whatever he called himself. He did this with vodka. So did whatchamacallit, Ryan Reynolds just did it with a gin company. I know, or tequila company. And then George Clooney did it. George Clooney has made more money outside the film industry because of who he is. And honestly, is because he made 3 movies. Ocean's 11, 12, and 13. Those 3 movies he has leveraged into multi-billion-dollar real estate deals in Las Vegas, and has his own tequila company, which I think he's about to sell or has sold for $200 million or something like that. Insane. But these are all artists who leveraged what they had to build something else. And now they could do whatever they want. And they were fine before. They were multimillionaires before, don't get me wrong. But now they've taken it to a whole other place where now they can be philanthropic, create other opportunities for other filmmakers, for other companies, for other people that they wouldn't been able to do before. The more money you have, the more money in the right hands equals more impact for people around the world. That's what I always say. So I always like to generate as much revenue as I can, because the more money I have at my disposal, the bigger my companies can go, the more impact I can make in the world in whichever way I see fit, in the sense of trying to help places where I have I want to do this for that group of people, or this for that group of people, and give away money to that group of people. That is all based on building this foundation that we've been talking about in this episode.
Yeah. And, we talked about before that quote, Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan to get punched in the face. Well, another boxer, George Foreman, the Foreman grill. I mean, it's not like he made all this money boxing. He made it because
his family is set up for generations upon generations if they're smart with their money. He's a multi-billionaire off of putting his name on George Foreman. By the way, just so you know, George Foreman wasn't their first choice. Hulk Hogan passed on that. Hulk Hogan passed on that, and believe me, there's not a day that goes by that he's not pissed off about it.
Tell you, like that kind of stuff. So if we rein it back in on a smaller scale, like I was mentioning, like I've now been applying just for a few months. The last few years, I changed professions to some extent because I needed to learn how to become a really good real estate agent.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to learn my craft and to serve clients the best before I really started putting effort into the show. So I was dabbling with my show a little bit sporadically, once a month, once every other month. But now at the beginning of the year, I was like, I'm going to commit to once a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then because I'm not a YouTuber, I'm able to create my show. And again, I'm writing it. I'm the spokesperson. I'm having a blast doing it. But I get to focus on a more very micro specific local level. And I realized the niche is much more active on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's a niche, by the way. It's a niche you can control. It's not control, but it's a niche that you can access. It's not like all real estate for all of Oregon. No. It's
right.
This specific area, the specific kind of customer. This is who this content is created. You're using the Film Trooper method without question.
Yes. So I don't have to succumb to the algorithm of YouTube. I don't have to be a YouTuber.
Correct.
I don't have to have this large like million followers to do a conversion 1%. I have to be very micro, like hyper local specific. And so then it wasn't until I had a breakthrough on finding like a hot button that meant something in the community. And there's so many things, because if you just sit and you listen and you read what these community posts are talking about, there's Nextdoor app as well. All of a sudden, I think I was able to create very specific content with the right headlines that just suddenly, all of a sudden, my videos took off.
And what's the conversion rate? I'm assuming is more than 1 or 2%.
Yes, it's gonna be a lot higher.
Correct.
And I'll tell you. So it's been 3 months now, and that has led to, I have been a part of 3 different local governments because of the videos I'm making, and that's got me more exposure and in terms of and it's my version of the modern day version of the bus stop billboard for real estate agents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now, but I also purposely try to create the videos so that they are evergreen.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter when you find them, they will have some relevancy. And I know it's working because some of my videos have been banned from like places like Nextdoor app because other real estate agents, I think, reported it as promotional, and other real estate agents have like their own Facebook groups that they started, and they won't put any of my content on. And so it's like, It's really fantastic. Like, oh, great. Now it's working, because if like the people probably see it as a threat and it's growing and things like that. So I wanted to share that with the audience, is saying, here we are talking about how you and I are applying these things in our daily lives. And it's a struggle. It's a work every day. It's not like we're pimping it. It's like we are.
It's a struggle every day. But the big difference is that I love doing what I do every day, and
me too. I finally got there.
Yeah, it's enjoyable, and I want to do it. I just want to do it every day, and it's so addictive to help people in my side, and I know you too. You're helping people get houses, but you're also able to express yourself as an artist.
I definitely I'm in this mode of like, we're talking about of service to an audience. So those who are listening out there, it's like, if you discover an audience that you want to serve, it's all about that. Getting your mindset of like, not on you, but when you say, what does that mean to serve? Like, if you're able to make content and of any type, then and it's helpful for that audience, then that you will be of service to them. I, for instance, is localized following. I'm making content for the community during this time where people are cooped up, so I'm giving a reprieve. So it's one of those things, like, I know that I could be a source of entertainment that's light, that's that's
you're providing a service. You're providing
it's feel good. Yeah, this is like my Disney version of that. And then on top of that, because all this stuff is virtual, like, there's a lot of tools at my disposal that allows me to. I'm doing helping a lot of other real estate professionals in property videos and photos to create this virtual experience, to connect people. I'm connecting clients with the right people, but I could do all this stuff because you and I are used to this. We're used to, like, before the days of Zoom, if we were doing, video conference, like, this stuff we are really comfortable with this world. And so I've been way more busy since the lockdown than I have been in a while. So letting people know
it's an opportunity, but if it's an opportunity that you're taking advantage, it's an opportunity you're taking advantage of. And that's the other thing. And I want to just kind of say this to everyone listening right now. I know right now a lot of you are probably locked up in a house somewhere, and not able to do what you normally do in your business, and maybe not able to generate the revenue they normally would generate. These are the times where the greatest opportunities are presented. If you're smart, this could be the time where that great shift that you need to make in your life happens. Because a lot of times you don't make this shift, you don't take that jump until you're either forced to, or you're like, remember that we've talked about this before in other shows, like that place where you're like, it's not too bad, but it's not too good. I'm like in that little midway, like, I'll just deal. That kind of world. You only move when you become completely uncomfortable. So you're going to go to the gym once you find out that you just had a heart attack, or your blood work came back, and, like, if you don't change something, you're going to die. That's when the pain becomes so powerful that it moves you, it launches you into the direction you have to go. We are that, where we're in right now is that pain for a lot of people. And instead of being angry or depressed about it, look at it like, okay, this is the world we live in. This is my reality. How can I use this pain and this place to make that shift? Should I start writing that book I've been wanting to write? Should I start, doing that business I wanted to create online? Should I start doing, creating a YouTube channel? Should I start doing this or writing that script? Whatever that thing is, the thing that you've been putting off, this is the time to maybe start down that road. And it could turn into the road, the business where you go. Who knows? In 6 months, you might just be the virtual tour guy in Oregon, Scott. And that becomes, you've cornered that market because you were the guy there when it all happened. It happens all the time in these kind of crises. So maybe this is that time for you. So look inside of yourself, everyone listening, and see, what can I do differently? How can I think differently? How can I build something from this pace? Because I would have never in a million years done it if I wouldn't have been forced into the situation that we're all in right now. That's kind of that was the message I wanted to put out there before we go.
No, it's great. And we'll wrap this up here shortly. But you're right. It's the stressors that are needed. Have like a crisis, it really defines your character, and moving forward. And all I can say again, whatever path any of us take, it's hard. Every day is going to be hard, but it's what's you and I were talking about. It's the process and dealing with that challenge. If that's what's enjoyable, that's the only thing that you can count on. One of the things I took away when I made the movie The Cube was exploring. My mom's from Thailand, my dad's from New York. There was growing up with necessarily like two ideologies, but the Buddhist teachings was like this one quote that was really simple. It's like, really the whole point of life is to share your knowledge with others. When you acquire it, you share it. That's it. So with that said, it's like the daily being zen about it, being in the moment, doing the work itself is the win. Whatever happens at the end, just kind of like, you just hope that you're prepared enough for it, that when the opportunity arises, you can take advantage of it. But before we wrap up here, I do want to share this one bit of information that I thought was really pivotal in my experience running Film Trooper, that gave me the perspective of going down this path of the film entrepreneur or the film trooper or whatever it is, like you and I have come across and talked about over years, is when people, we're going to go to how sort of like how movies make money or where money comes from for these movies and where we all fit into this. You and I have shared this before, but I got this from Scott Kirkpatrick, who works in the distribution world a little bit, but he wrote a book. But he was really breaking down, like, if you want to know how producers make money or movies make money, this is just like a case scenario. We talked about this before, which was this distribution company or production company has a relationship with these international buyers. Again, all this stuff is going to change, but I'm just trying to say that these are sort of the principles of like how people like Harvey Weinstein made all his money, before he went to jail and, where all that kind of stuff happens. But so these, you and I could start a production company or distribution company and say, you know what, and build these relationships with some international buyers, like these, say we have a relationship with some Japanese film buyers. Like they will buy content if it's of a certain ilk. And so we have this relationship, and we over the years, we've been going to film markets, all the international film markets, all the local film markets, is building up our relationship with them. And okay. And then this is it. So from there, we just make a poster of a big giant monster destroying a city, maybe a helicopter over its head. Right. We just show this to our Japanese friends that we know that this is the type of content they buy. We show this to them, and they, this is great. And they say, this is great. If you can deliver this film by this date, let's make a deal. And so say it's $2 million. We'll give you $2 million for this movie. So we shake hands, we write up all the legal documents saying if we deliver this movie based on this poster we created, then they'll give us $2 million. Well, let's back up. This is how the world works in the film business. There is no script. There is no movie. It was just a poster and a relationship. And then this sort of promissory note that we got from this company saying we will deliver $2 million. They're reputable. They're going to give us $2 million.
Yeah.
You and I will go to a bank that does this type of loans, show them that we're reputable, that they are reputable, meaning like
we've done this before.
A deal with a reputable company.
Yeah, we've done this before.
So they say, okay, we'll give you the loan for $2 million. So you're thinking like, hey, we're going to make a film for $2 million that's based off this monster poster. That's not how it works. You and I, we're going to pocket $1.5 million. We're only going to make the film for $500,000. So we hire the director, the writer, the producer, and all the crew. Remember, when you're working in the world of filmmaking, your salary is based off what the budget of the film is. They're like, hey, the budget's only $500,000, so your salary can only be paid this per week, right? So the film is made for $500,000. We delivered that to Japan. They said, you made it. That's great. It could be schlocky. It could be terrible. As long as it delivered on the poster
and they're happy.
That was promised to them. They gave us $2 million. We take it to the bank. We pay back that loan. You and I just pocket $1.5 million. We didn't have to make the film. We just made the deal. So this is how Harvey Weinstein and all those guys make their money. They're just making deal.
Past tense, made their money. He's not making movies anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying of his kind that
sure.
Producers. So if you ever wonder where you fit into the whole scheme of things in the money-making machine, it goes, if you are working on a film or a television project and there's a budget set for X amount, just know that the producers and other people on top are making way more because they made the deal. And then you're just stuck making what you're making. You're going to make your day rate or whatever it is, and then you move on. And so you putting your head wrapped around that, it's like being a film trooper, moving forward in this world. It's like, do you want to be part of that world or just be aware that that's how it works? And then how do you gain more creative control and self-empowerment to weather the storm so you're not, basically part of that machine that you don't have a lot of say in sometimes?
If I may bring it back to the beginning, to bookend it, you have the three paths. You can be the employee. You could be the production company or independent contractor or small business owner, or you could build a business, an asset that generates revenue for you while you sleep. And all three are very respectful paths, but you have to choose the path that you want to go down. Because there's people who just want to be an employee. There's people who just want to own a production company. And then there's other people who want to build a business that generates revenue for them to give them the freedom to do whatever they want creatively, artistically, in life in general. And that is the question you need to ask yourself. Which path do you want to walk? There's no right or wrong answer. I'm obviously lean in one direction. Scott and I both lean in kind of one direction. But if you like I said, some of the greatest filmmakers of all time walk the first path. Hitchcock was, I think Hitchcock was an employee pretty much his entire life because he came from the old Hollywood system where he was just a hired hand. And then later on, I don't know if he ever had a production. I think he had a production company at one point. Yeah, when he opened up the TV show, when he started doing TV, he did it through his own production company. But so on and so forth. But some of the greatest filmmakers of all time went down that path. You just have to ask yourself the question, where do you want to be and how you want to be, how you want to walk this path, which is a very, you chose this filmmaking world, and it's not an easy world, and it's getting more difficult and more confusing every single day that goes by. And before we finish up, Scott, I want to personally say thank you for doing all the work that you've done with Film Trooper over the years. Film Trooper was around before I ever walked onto the scene. I still remember the day that you reached out to me after you saw me show up with guns a-blaring, and you were like, "Who are you? Where did you come from? Like, what's going on?" And that story I always tell all the time. Like, this guy from Trooper. Yeah, this is what Scott did when I first came on the scene, and we became fast friends ever since then.
Yeah.
But I really do want to thank you for all the stuff that you've done for the community, in the way that you've done it, in the flavor that you have done it, because it's I can't ever be Scott McMahon. That flavor, that non-threatening ethnic, I can't be that. But what you've done is helped a lot of filmmakers along the way, and I know this is the last episode of the show for you of Film Trooper. Film Trooper. Excuse me. You see, Florida and slip. No, I'm so used to saying Film Trooper. I don't say Film Trooper that often. Yeah. But this is the last episode of Film Trooper, man, and I'm so blessed and humbled that I would be the last guest. This has been an epic conversation. This is so packed with information and value bombs that both you and I were able to drop in there. But I want to thank you again for having me on the show. I've been on the show 3 times, I think. 4 times, 4 or 5 times. I've been on the show a few times, and I truly, truly, truly appreciate everything you've done for me, for my audience, my tribe, but more importantly, what you've done for the Film Trooper tribe and for filmmakers who ever had the pleasure of listening to one of your podcasts or consuming some of your content. So from the bottom of my heart, my friend, thank you so much for all the work that you did, and you will be missed, but I hope this is a good send-off.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for taking this time. And again, for everybody listening, I really do hope you got a lot of nuggets out of this to think, to be like, whoa, where do I fit into this world and how do we move forward? But, we'll still be around. Hopefully I'll pop on your Film Troopreneur podcast.
Anytime.
Pops up,
Anytime, Scott. Whatever you want to come on and talk about what you're doing in the film, like your Film Troopreneur method with the real estate, I'm all about it. You let me know when you want to come on.
Right. It doesn't mean that I won't necessarily make another narrative or documentary or stuff like that.
Even then.
And yeah, it just means that I'm applying something to my base, my foundation. And the foundation is solid. Nothing stops you from creating all these other things. So
absolutely, man. Absolutely. I again, thank you so much for everything you've done, brother. And if anybody wants, and you're still going to keep your website up running, right?
Yeah. It exists. It always exists.
And the podcast will still be on archive for people to listen to.
Yep.
All right.
So, all right, my friend. We'll
Thank
talk
you.
to you soon.